upside down. Girl, you turn me inside out. Round and round, and welcome to the Say Report. I am your host, Devon, and joining me as always is my host companion, Sejohn.
My name is Sejohn, and I'm here to say that I like to rap in a rapping way.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn?
I am the Joey Fatone of this group. I mean, I've recognized that.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. I'm the Justin Timberlake of this group, which is really fun. How we formed a super group of the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC called the Instract Street Boy. That did not. If this were a more professional endeavor, I would stop and restart it.
I mean, I do appreciate the energy that you bring in this morning. It's a good energy.
Well, so I want to talk about it. I was up very early today. I was up at like 6 o'clock. Because even though I stayed up playing Kirby till 1, and we're going to talk about Kirby and the Forgotten Lands just a little bit in this episode of the Say Report, I was up at 6, so I'm full of energy anyway. But then I went out shopping. Not the reason why I was up early. Like, I've watched a SWAT, I've done a bunch of things, and then I'm like, we should get the shopping done because everybody's awake. I stopped at Starbucks, and I discovered something new that is going to revolutionize coffee for me.
Did you realize you could buy it in the store? You don't have to go to the
No. If I'm getting coffee made at Starbucks, I'm getting coffee made at Starbucks. And already, I touched on this briefly in our last episode, and this is not going to be a coffee fueled episode. Well, it's coffee fueled, but it's not going to be a coffee talk filled episode like last week's. But that you can choose how many shots of espresso are in your drink when you get it from Starbucks. That's just a thing. And I generally go at 6 shots because what the hell? It's a venti anyway. Why shouldn't at least half of it be caffeinated brown water?
So is that 6 shots on top of, I think in a venti is already 3. So are you getting 9 shots?
No. I'm getting 3 additional shots on top of it. Yeah. Which again then is about it's 12 ounces of coffee of the 20 ounces that's in a venti, because venti means
caffeine
20.
is a hell of a drug, man. I just want to make sure you're not freebasing caffeine.
Oh no. I'm not crazy. I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. Right? If I were going nuts, I'd just eat coffee grounds like a detective in 1970s New York.
Yeah, it used to be a real thing back when we were in college, and it happened in grad school as well. So I don't want to act like it was just URI, but the how much caffeine do you consume in a day challenge of well, I get 4 shots of my espresso in the morning. Well, I get 5, and at some point there were kids around us that were getting legitimately sick because they were drinking 80 shots of espresso in a day and the 6-pack of fucking Red Bull. But
I actually never met any of those people, and I'm okay. You know who I always remember in URI is the people who would buy the half liter of Poland Springs and then dump a thing of Airborne tablets into it and then just swig Airborne all day.
Oh god, yeah. And then they would tell you about how they were preventing themselves from ever getting sick, yet they were always the first ones to get sick. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, I remember a time where that person was maining Airborne for a week, and then his understudy went on. We've talked about this person a lot without saying his name lately, and I really enjoy it.
Well, but it's again, this was not just 1 or 2 people that were doing these kinds of things. You do weird shit. I mean, I guess it kind of explains some of the supplement bullshit that goes on with guys like Alex Jones and what's his nuts there, Joe Rogan, our overlord, our podcast overlord. But
not my podcast overlord.
Which they push their weird alpha supplements and whatever is all based on just people at that point in their lives that have disposable income because of whatever reason, and they think that it's going to help them get through whatever college exams they need that month.
Yeah, man. Exactly. It's just a graduation of the subliminal messaging that was called to attention in Josie and the Pussycats, brought forward to really the new age of teenagers.
Such a good documentary, Devon. Why didn't we listen?
I listened. I just don't give a damn because it's on Fleek or Fletch. Thatch? I don't know. One of the weird words that they try to make happen in that. All I know is that blue is the new orange, and I'm wearing a blue shirt today, and it used to be orange. But yeah, so what I also found out is that you can get your lattes made upside down, hence the song break at the opening of this, where the milk goes in first and then the coffee goes on top, and that's getting my my motor wound up like a McDonald's Happy Meal toy car.
That's like very British. Pour your milk in before your tea. That's really, I don't even want to get into the science of lattes and why that's actually very confusing. That is a legitimately interesting revelation on a level of which I do not care about.
No, yeah, that's the thing. Like, well, okay, so on the app you get to choose all this stuff. Not sponsored, not an ad. Just I was messing around with the Starbucks app because I was waiting while my mother was getting gas, and I found the customization tab. Yeah. And the customization tab at like McDonald's is salt or no salt. Like that's right, pretty much where you're at. But at Starbucks, it's like a whole program unto itself. So I started messing around with it, and then I found, how do you want the shots prepared? And it's normal or upside down. And I'm like, well, upside down sounds interesting.
Let's try that today.
And I did it. And first of all, this is the best cup of Starbucks coffee I've ever had because it actually tastes like coffee. It doesn't taste like sugar. Because the coffee's hitting me first. I don't know. Yeah. It's really good. And I actually legitimately feel energized, which is another, like, feather in my cap. But the real thing I want to talk about is you guys did your Twitter homework, and I want to thank you for it. But the Papa Murphy stuff was supposed to go to Sejohn, not to me. But I got a lot of...
They know that while I check Twitter regularly, I don't respond to things.
No, I didn't respond. Well, I think I said, the Papa Murphy stuff was for at Steve versus the World. But yeah, and it turns out that in 2003, Papa Murphy's was voted the best pizza chain in America. And that was by Restaurants and Institutions magazine.
But they don't make pizza, Devon. They give you the ingredients for pizza in a convenient way for you to make pizza when you go home. So really what they did is they voted your house the best restaurant.
Exactly.
There you go, everybody.
But also Pizza Today had them as the best in 2001, 2006, 2008, and 2009. So everything that you're talking about, the last time they were relevant was when they won Zagat's in 2012 for best fast food. Mm-hmm. But like they haven't been relevant for about 10 years. But the crazier thing to me is that at one point they were the best pizza chain in America, and I did not know about them until you kind of put them on blast last episode.
Well, and here's the thing is things change, and maybe 10 years ago they did a simple thing like, I don't know, use boxes instead of just like fucking paper plates and saran wrap on your way out the door.
That paper plate is actually a specially designed crisping tray.
I
got a lot of stuff about Papa Murphy's.
That's fine. That can also be in the cardboard box, guys. All I'm asking for is just a nice hearty box that I can bring home so that I don't have a literal dough pizza just forming to my chair next to me, my bucket seat of my car on the way home.
My other favorite thing, and this is actually from their website because I did a little bit of research after I was talking to it, is the fact that it should be refrigerated if you don't intend to eat it within the next 24 hours.
Oh, God.
So I really want to meet the person who's like going to Papa Murphy's on Tuesday. I feel like Tuesday is probably the lightest night for takeout food, right? As opposed to like a Friday or a Saturday. Like I feel on a Tuesday, you might still have to wait at some of the higher end places, but the wait's going to be significantly lowered for takeout food on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we get Papa Murphy's on Tuesday, and then we refrigerate it till Friday. And it still tastes fresh.
Like, there's a whole industry, especially out here. So, like, man, we got to get into some Mormonism stuff for a hot second to talk about my week really quick. But this is a good segue into it, right? Is one of the big things that's out here is there's a culture and there's an understanding that somebody, a particular member of the family, is going to be responsible for cooking dinner every night. That is a pretty ingrained thing out here, and I think everybody can kind of put two and two together. But the idea being that not everybody
chef, right, Sejohn? The chef in the family?
Yeah, but the problem is that like not every mother out here loves cooking, but it is so ingrained in the culture that they are the ones responsible for it that a lot of women will take up cooking. And, you know, for the ones that find that they enjoy it, it's a great like discovery. For the ones that were taught it their whole lives. It's just something that they just do. But there is a number of people, a measurable percentage of people that are put in that position that still friggin' hate it, as they should, because it's not something they like to do. It's just something that the society is telling them they're supposed to do. So what is really big out here, and I'm sure that these places exist outside of Utah, but they are huge in Utah, is places that will do all of the prep work for you. And that's really what Papa Murphy's is they are kind of, to me, the lowest on the totem pole of that particular brand, because there's like a place out here called Pallets and Plates and Pallets, and I think that's like a national brand as well.
That's super clever. It would hurt my eyes to see Pallets and Plates, or Plates and Pallets, whichever one it is, actually written out on a sign.
I always think it's Plates and Pilates, and I'm just like, oh, exercise and a meal.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
is it vegan too?
Oh man, but there's like, it's this America's not America's Test Kitchen. It's like America's like Night Kitchen or something like that. But what the idea is that you can either go in or you can go online, and you can order all of the ingredients all put together in a convenient way so that you can just go pick it up and then you can make it at any point, right? And so what a lot of families will do is they will invest in a large fridge or freezer, and then on like Monday of the week they will go to one of these places, drop $300 instead of going to the grocery store, and they'll spend their grocery budget on just pre-made meals. Because again, there is this idea that like they have to feed a family of probably 6 or 7 people, because inevitably these families also end up with like 5 kids in them, and they're not somebody that necessarily enjoys the act or the like research that goes into cooking, and this just takes it all out. So like I'm in full, like, I fully understand why these kinds of places exist. And the idea that Papa Murphy's has to tell you, hey, like, eat it within 24 hours, I actually get that, because there's probably somebody out there that's buying 3 or 4 of them for the week.
Oh, it's not eat in 24 hours. They will last up to 60 days.
But, like, freeze. Like, put it in the freezer.
Make sure that this is not going to just sit on your counter.
Exactly, right. Yeah. Well, that dough needs to proof, Dev. But yeah, no, like
alcoholic
so that's like
pizza.
That's just a whole like culture out here of pre-made meal like places that you can go and pick stuff up, and like people will invest in just specific fridges for like their meal planning and things like that out here. And again, I know that there's like a level of this happening everywhere in the world. Like meal planning is not unique to Utah. There's just a unique sense in Utah that this is how it's supposed to be done. Like literally it is part of Mormon religion that you are supposed to be prepping for, I think, 3 years. You're supposed to have a prepper closet that is full of stuff that should let you survive for up to 3 years, and it is in their like religious doctrine that this is something that you should be doing, right? So the idea of like preparing just for the week alone is like nothing to them, because they're already thinking 3 years ahead. But it's so buying this sort of stuff in advance and not having to think about it, like, yeah.
What I actually really like about this, honestly, what it tickles my taste buds, just to use a phrase, is this is just meal boxes, right? Like HelloFresh or ButcherBox, but distilled out into a brick and mortar location. Mm-hmm. That's what it sounds like to me. And that's kind of cool that such a thing exists in this world. There's no market for it out here on the East Coast.
There used to be a place in Seekonk across from the cinema. There was where Strawberry's music.
Okay, right? So now we're really dating ourselves,
right? Well, so this was after Strawberry's, but that's how I'm always going to remember that strip was there. One of the places that moved in when Strawberry's shut down, because they owned like that whole like building. They were huge back when we used to go to like record and movie stores and stuff like that. And then they broke it up into like 5 other smaller stores. One of them on like the tail end was one of these types of stores, and it opened back in like 2005-ish, I want to say, right? Like, and so when it came out, it was one of those things where everybody was like, oh, a nice little new restaurant. And then like people would show up and they'd be like, I'm sorry, I have to take this home and do what now? And then like, you want me to cook the food?
How do you know I even have an oven? What do you...
Yeah, and it was like this whole like discovery for people about this kind of restaurant, I don't know if restaurant's even the right word.
There's also like Gourmet King or whatever that's called on like Route 2 as you're entering North Kingston. There's that place that they sell Kinder eggs, so they could get shut down at any time. Which is just fun.
Just one kid who just bites a little too quick into the Kinder egg. Oh God,
yeah. I love that Kinder eggs are illegal in our country, but I could buy a gun in 3 days. Yeah, it's just just thoughts about things. But yeah, so we did get some Papa Murphy stuff, but it's just crazy that it is not a thing that I had ever heard about, and it was the restaurant, like named the Restaurant of America in 2003. I also dig that it won a fast food poll when like buying an uncooked pizza to then cook it feels like the slowest fast food ever.
It's not even fast service, right?
Yeah.
Like fast service restaurants, there's been like a huge like move in the last few years to differentiate between fast food and fast service restaurant. So like a Five Guys would be considered not fast food but fast service,
Yep.
because you do get your food fast enough, but there's like some idea. I don't know what the differentiators are, right? But there's a sense
You're
that
not
it is a
walking
little
away
bit-
from the counter with your food, essentially, is the difference between a fast food and a fast service.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's something. So there's something there where, like, you know, okay, so maybe it's not fast food, but maybe it's this, but it's not even that, right? Because you still have to take it home and cook it.
Yeah, it's like the next. It's like a slow service restaurant.
Yeah.
Really, which I'm not as pleased with that joke as I thought I was when it was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's redressing the things from last week that I felt were necessary. Also, I'm still fucking sick of Tunic. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Just everybody. But what I've realized, what I have learned about it is I maybe played the game wrong by being a person who, like, explored and just did things. And this is not casting aspersions on anybody who did it, but one of these guys that I watch on Twitch, he did a whole day of Tunic stuff. And that's like 8 to 10 hours that he just played the game. And then I like dipped in a few times, and then 2 days later I saw him streaming Tunic again, and I'm like, I wonder what he's working on, because I know that like the Zelda portion of that game, where like you go into dungeons and fight stuff, is a relatively small part of the experience. So I'm curious what he's going to be doing. And he was still on his first playground and had finally found a part of the world, and I'm just like, oh my god, to think that this person had played this game for at least 10 hours on release day and didn't locate the forest area of the map. Like, it's an interesting thing to how other people were experiencing that world. Now, I don't know if he got caught up in trying to solve the mystery of the language,
Right.
or something like that, but yeah, it's as I've seen how other people are approaching it, I feel like my approach to the game, which wasn't necessarily beat it as fast as possible, but it was, I kind of want to get in and get out of this game. And I still have like 25 hours on my playthrough of Tunic. Like, it's not like I speed ran it my first time through. I maybe approached it the wrong way, and that feels weird to me.
I don't know. I wouldn't think about it that way. I mean, essentially, it sounds like the game kind of invites you to kind of explore the mystery going on beyond, you know, we talked about this, the metagame. It invites you to explore the metagame, but it doesn't seem that it, like, makes it, it doesn't seem to make it a necessary tool to feel like you're progressing. So, like, it's not that you're necessarily progressing or not progressing in what the quote unquote game is, right? But it's that carrot and stick. It's that endorphin rush when you are rewarded and you move forward, and so you keep moving forward. That's how video games work, right? It seems like you were getting just enough endorphins from just pushing yourself through A, B, and C, where everybody else was just focused on other stuff. And I don't know, like that again. It's all comes down to how the game is presented, and one could argue that the way in which it was presented to you in particular just didn't work, right? Like that is that seems to be the ongoing narrative there.
Yeah, I don't know. And then I also I watched some guys who were like trying to see what the speed run of the game might be, and they gave themselves 3 hours to see how far they could get. And as that 3 hours went on, they kept sort of moving the goal tape closer and closer to what they would consider a clear of the game, which was also a little strange to me. But also, in developing a speedrun like that, that's how you get, like, 8-bit messenger as a category on speedruns.com, where you just play the messenger until you're done with the 8-bit section of the game, which I get, but the messenger is one of those games. We did a little mini review on it, and I love that game. I do love that game. Most of my complaints in that mini review were hardware-related. Is not a good game to play on the Nintendo Switch, which is actually kind of crazy when you consider it's 8-bit and 16-bit graphics, but a lot is going on underneath the hood of that game.
For sure.
And just going from 8-bit to 16-bit does not open up the Metroid part of that game, which so many people have complaints or comments about. So it's not like you're even finishing the first half of the game. You're literally only finishing about a quarter of the game, and they're like, well, that's the speedrun, though.
Yeah,
and
that's
it comes
a weird...
from things like, we're going to see how a speedrun feels, and it's like, you know what, this feels like a good stoppage point.
Yeah, that's, I mean, all that goes to prove is how the speedrunning community is really just that, is like there is no overarching authority. And maybe, and you know, I'm not saying there should be. I'm just pointing out that, like, for people that get caught up in that kind of stuff and take that stuff seriously, and to a point start like giving people shit online because they're not quote unquote good, right? like the get good attitude, like maybe we don't apply that to every single game that comes out, guys, because as we are learning with these kinds of like smaller releases like Tunic and like The Messenger and stuff like that, is like sometimes games are just not built that way. You know, like I think this is something that we've talked about before with things like randomization and stuff like that too, right? Is like some games are just not, they're just not built to be played in these ways, and it's cool when people like develop these ways to do it, but that's just not how it goes. You know, like one of the other ones that's come up recently that I think is really interesting is Resident Evil, and the people are now slowly starting to get to what Devon did in his first weekend, the like 4th and 5th version playthroughs of like Resident Evil 8. And you know, and people have talked about how the game evolves as they play through that game. Like the first time you play it, it is this Resident Evil creepy ass, I'm going to take my time, figure out where things are style thing. And then by the time you get through your 5th playthrough, you've got like unlimited ammo on like a heavy gun, and so you're just running through like an action hero, just blowing things away as you're just getting through that stuff. And so people are quote unquote speed running it by doing these things, but it's like, well, how is the speed run affected by how much you know the game / how much you've played the game / what you've unlocked and all that sort of stuff, right? Because like a fresh install of Resident Evil 8 speed run is going to look very different than somebody that is on their 5th run, even if you have played the game before. If you uninstall everything and start from 0, you're back to not having a lot of the stuff that you've unlocked for subsequent playthroughs, right? And so that discussion is now starting to happen with a lot of that stuff, because guys have been quote unquote speed running Resident Evil 8 for a few months now, and just people are just arguing about what constitutes speed run and doesn't. Also, people are still just up in arms about the fact that they take all your weapons away in that one part. Because
I love that one part of the game, and you know what? As that person who in my first weekend did play the game that 4 or 5 times. Mm-hmm. Optimizing the dollhouse section, which I don't think that's a huge thing to say what it is. Optimizing that dollhouse section is probably my favorite experience within Resident Evil 8.
Yeah, and I should be clear. When I say up in arms, I mean just a couple of people are just like pissy because they want to play it like an action hero, but that game has like 7 allows you to pretty much, by the time you get through your 3rd or 4th playthrough of 7, you can just breeze through that in like 3 or 4 hours.
You say that, but when you, spoilers for Resident Evil 7, like this is an actual spoiler, when you get to the Maya part of this storyline and you're on the boat in the past,
that's true.
That really slows the game down.
Yeah, no, I didn't even consider that part. I'm just, that's what people are comparing that moment in 8. They're saying like they never felt that when they were speed running 7, because Ethan just gets to be a badass. But and they almost feel like they purposely put this section in to slow you down. I wonder, maybe.
I don't know. But, there's that great escape room section in 7 too, where you can speed through it once you've done it, because you only need like the 2 items to get through it. But you can also do that with the dollhouse, because once you know, you don't need to explore the Maya doll, because you know the 3 symbols to get into the well.
Yeah, that's true. They don't change, right?
Yeah, they don't change. And that's the thing, even going back to, because I finally got the Platinum on PS5 a little bit earlier this year, because I wanted to get it off of my PS5. Because I played it on PS4 the first time, mostly because that's what was hooked up and everything. But also, I really wanted to compare 7 to 8, and it felt a little weird to do that by going from PS4 hardware to PS5 hardware, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I finally did 8 on the PS5, and I hadn't touched the game since it released last year, so that was like April. So it's been about 10 months since I've played Resident Evil 8, and getting down there, I'm like, okay, I remember what 2 of the symbols are, but I don't know the 3rd one, and it was a lot quicker to go to the body and look at the one part where that symbol was to move forward, as opposed to having to get the scissors and explore the whole thing. the way I did the first time. So there's still optimization. That really just kind of feels like, but I liked running around with unlimited ammo, and now I need to take a second and like realize everything that's going on. It's like, yeah, but that's what I mean. Every Resident Evil kind of has a section like that.
Yeah.
To be completely honest, and I'm talking even the more modern ones, like the post-7 ones. The remakes of 2 and 3 also have sections where you are completely stripped of everything and need to get your stuff back.
Yeah, and if it's done right, that's a wonderful mechanic. If it's done poorly, it feels cheap. I think I think the kind of the baseline for that kind of conversation, right? Is like, is it working? Is it being done well? Much like with Tunic, like, are they just padding their game out by adding a bunch of meta bullshit, or are they actually presenting like a valid, interesting concept with that? And it all depends on, I think, how it is, how it hits you and when it hits you. Like like with every video game.
I mean, and this is, since we're talking about Resident Evil and it's up, I will say the one that sort of failed in that, if we're going to talk about a failure, and even then, I really enjoyed it, Resident Evil 3's remake. That game saves the part where you're kind of stripped down to nothing until the final boss fight, and that feels very strange. Is what I'm going to say. But also, it makes it so that you can't just flip on like infinite rocket launcher ammo and rush through the hardest difficulty of the game, because you still have that wall at the end of the final boss where it's like, yeah, I know you got here in like an hour, but now all you have is a shitty gun because we took all your other stuff.
Yeah. It's also, I think the other reason that this particular conversation is coming up is because of a lot of stuff with Elden Ring, and the realization that Miyazaki has a weird penchant for bosses that require specific item type things, and people feeling like that is just a weird stopgap in games that you used to do and people just shouldn't do anymore. Other people are, of course, arguing, no, this is genius and that sort of thing too. But that's also been kind of part of that same conversation, is like, you spend all this time working on this one particular build, and then you come up against a boss where your build just doesn't work, so you have to just like reconfigure yourself. And is that good game design, or is that lazy? Like, is the conversation is
I mean, I could make arguments for both, but what I will say is the respecking in Elden Ring, even though I've not taken part in it yet, it is the easiest respecking in any of the Souls games.
Sure.
So they understood this thing where, like, we don't want to punish the player who's developed, like, a strength build character by putting them in a battle against something that really requires range or magic. So, I mean, I'm not there yet. Elden Ring, the bloom has not gone off the rose of Elden Ring, but, I bought Kirby this weekend, is what I'm going to say. And we'll talk a little bit about Kirby and the Forgotten Land a little bit later on, but I like where we're at right now. And I will eventually finish Elden Ring. I do know that. I have gotten to the point where I can't go online anymore because I want to beat it on the original patch, especially when the patch notes say that some of the stuff they added into the 1.03 patch has made the game easier.
Yeah, they nerfed a couple of bosses, from what I understand, and pumped up a couple of weapons and things like that.
Yeah, but they also took out all the speedrun exploits. Which is another weird thing about speedruns, is in the early days of a game, speedrunners should keep their fucking mouth shut. Because when they're still, like, looking at the game and patching things, they're going to take out your exploits.
It's a paradox, though, because the entire concept of being a speedrunner is getting your face out there as the one that can do it. So, like, yes, you're not wrong. If you want these exploits to persist, you should stop like highlighting them. But also, like, that's just the whole attitude of that community.
You get a newspaper and you start your stream
screenshots.
Yeah. Like, I don't know.
Mail it to yourself. Just mail the whole game to
yourself. The whole game. Yeah, it's just a thing. And the other thing, the last thing, while speedrunning is a topic that we're talking about, the Super Mario World Kaizo community is really going through a sort of moment with speedrunning right now, in the fact that this guy came in, his name is Stu, Stu _ right? I'll give him a shout. You can follow him on Twitch or whatever. And he's wonderful to watch because he takes these games that are supposed to be hard as balls and he applies actual speedrunning technique to them in the fact that he will practice sections and optimize them like you would see in most other speedruns. But speedrunning in that community for so long was just trying to mitigate deaths and get through the levels as fast as possible. Nobody was actually playing them like speedrunners were playing them. And a lot of these people who were like, quote, speedrunners in that community have kind of stepped away from it because that doesn't interest them as speedrunning. And I sympathize with that because it doesn't interest me either. I like being able to start a game up and see how quickly I can beat it. I'm not real interested in like, this is a frame perfect trick and you're going to miss it 60% of the time.
No, but I will point out that you very specifically did fall into that kind of life with Link to the Past, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, it's not that it doesn't grab you eventually. It's just that that's not the hook, right? Like, for you, like, that's not the reason you showed up, but it's the reason you'll stay if you like it, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
You say that, but the reason why the bloom went off of the Rose of A Link to the Past randomization and like tournaments and stuff was because a bunch of exploits and glitches were made legal for running the game in randomization. And I'm not hyper interested in learning those techniques and tricks. And if you don't do them, you can't be competitive. Yeah. And really, that's just like any sort of competition. We're always sort of getting better as people, as competitors. And it's the reason why, like, everybody says, oh, if Babe Ruth were playing baseball today, it's like, yeah, if Babe Ruth were playing baseball today, he would die of a heart attack before the end of the second inning.
The amount of steroids that dude would have put in his system.
I'm not even saying that. I'm saying, like, it's just we just transplant Babe Ruth. The guys who played baseballs back then, they were not in shape.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, like, we can get into like what is the conversation of like sportsmanship and the element of sport and like what makes good competition, right? But that's really what we're pointing towards is when everybody in the room is doing their best to get good. Eventually, it is going to get broken down to this minuscule level of like you're saying with these particular speedrunners that they spend 8-10 hours a day just playing this game, and it might be the same level over and over and over again just to learn, the best way to, not just the best pathway through, but the exploits and all that sort of stuff, for sure. I mean, it might
be 8-10 hours a day on one trick.
Right.
And then when they go to apply it, there's still like a 50% chance that they miss it and then have to reset the run.
Or worse, that whatever particular thing they're depending on only occurs in like 5 out of 10 instances or 5 out of 15 instances. So like they also can know like, oh well, we walked onto this Mario Kaiser level at this point, and we hesitated at this point here, so we know 5 minutes from now we're gonna come up against this thing, and the shell's not gonna be the right place for this trick we need to do. So we got to restart the entire thing because we were like a frame late to this particular section. Yeah. Like it gets crazy, like the science that they're applying to this stuff.
Right. It's like Mitch Flower Power, like the man of Super Mario Brothers 3 speedruns. And I say that because he's been on like the Stephen Colbert show.
Yeah.
Like this is a guy that's actually gotten some sort of international acclaim for what he's doing. Now all of his world record stuff is literally dependent on random number generated things. Like going through that final world and passing the hand levels. And if he gets pulled into one, like that's a reset for him. Yep. Because those extra 10 frames of gameplay is going to screw up the world record for him.
Yep.
And that's the stuff, like, that's a little bit too involved for me.
If anybody wants to see, just to put a cap on this, because this is obviously getting to a very niche conversation, but if anybody wants to see a very kind of more open doors like vision into this world, check out King of Kong, because there's a beautiful moment in the earlier moments of that movie where they show Steve Wiebe drawing with a wax pencil on the Donkey Kong screen the pathway that he should be taking in order to like best run through stuff, and like this is what we're talking about. This is what guys are doing, is they're literally putting up like what do you call it? Like I'm trying to think of the material, but they're putting like slides up over their screens and drawing with
transparency sheets.
Transparency sheets, yeah. They're like taking transparency sheets and they're like putting them up over their screens, and they're like literally frame perfect, trying to figure out the math on where they need to be when to do this sort of stuff. And like that's fun to them, and that's cool. And I'm not saying that's not the quote unquote right way to play. It's just that when you get down to that level of detail, you are going to lose a lot of people's interest that this is just not what they're into. And like, it gets really weird. And the problem is like you're saying, is how much of this ends up feeding back into things like the way that the community treats people, the way that the developers react in patches that come out and things like that. Like this niche like thing, this niche market for these games that are playing games in this particular way that not everybody's playing them has such a huge impact compared to the weight of the actual audience to me. And that is the part where it starts to really break down. Like, you start talking about how you don't like patches and day one patches and things like that, and I'm right there with you. Just my reasoning has nothing to do with like my way of wanting to play it. I don't play games on release day anymore. It just doesn't happen. He said, as somebody that just played Tiny Tina on release day.
On release day.
Talk about that. But like, I don't. It's a rare occurrence, right? Like maybe 2 games a year I will go out of my way to make sure I have on release day, and they have to be something very special to me in particular. I don't care about what the community is doing on the first day, right? But I do respect the idea that what I am playing a week or 2 weeks later may be a very different experience from day one, all because some asshole on the internet figured out that if he bombed himself through this wall, he could get to the bad guy before everybody else. And like they fix that. And like, what else does that change, right? Do they have to nerf the bomb in order to do that? Do they have to change the way textures behave? Like, what do they have to do to fix that? And how does it affect everything else in the game now? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that nerfing of the bomb, is it the radius of the explosion or is it the power of the explosion? And then, like, was the game built with that larger area of attack for the bombs, and then suddenly the way you're supposed to take care of a boss using bombs becomes harder for somebody who's playing the game 3 months later.
Right.
Because of something unrelated to that fight. Because of something that was tested and determined to be the good thing, then being used to blow someone from the start of the game to the end of the game, and it all changes. It's nuts. It's a really crazy thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, and then just to put a capper on this whole thing, like a year ago, I was doing Cyber Shadow speedruns, and I was enjoying myself, and I got like 3rd in 100%, and that felt pretty good. But then, once all the exploits started coming around, and it was like frame perfect, or like cutting through like walls and things, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not interested anymore. And that's when I moved on to other stuff. But It doesn't negate the fun that I had that original time through. Right? I don't know. It's an interesting thing, and it's something that I've been thinking about specifically because of how Tunic has dropped on the world and sort of still been everywhere in my world. Now, before we talk more video games, I asked you if you were able to watch something before we recorded today, and I completely understand if you didn't, but have you dipped your toe at all into the 21st season of Law & Order?
I pulled it up, was ready to watch, and then I got a very delightful text that said, "Hey, did you want to start early?"
Excellent.
So
I'm super glad that I am the architect of my own ruination.
You asked me yesterday, "Hey, can you watch this thing?" And I rightfully told you, I'm like, I could try. I could definitely try to. Oh man, like so why do you need me to watch Law and Order 21 years in?
Well, first of all, because it's been off the air for 6 years.
27 years in? Is that the math?
Yeah, I believe it's 27 years of Law & Order. I think Anthony Anderson is one of the detectives, and which makes me happy, because his seasons were some of my favorite seasons of later-day Law & Order. Yeah. Nothing beats the Jerry Orbach stuff. That is Law & Order for me, and I'm sorry about that, but Jerry Orbach.
Yeah. No, of course, but I see what you're saying. You want me to partake in Anthony Anderson's retirement plan?
Yeah, I guess that's sort of. No, so I mean that's sort of the way they tied it together to Law and Order. Very much is Anthony Anderson and Sam Waterston are kind of the 2 guys who came back. Everybody else seems new, or at least they hadn't been on the show for a while, so I haven't seen them for a bit.
Yeah.
And I wanted to watch it because Law & Order, I mean, growing up in the 90s, that's what Law & Order was, what the background of my life was. I don't know if that's the same for you. I don't know how big a difference a couple of years makes in terms of background noise. But A&E, Arts and Entertainment Television, it used to be Channel 37 in Rhode Island, they would do Law & Order marathons every Monday holiday. And
Yeah, no, I mean, Law and Order, it was one of those shows where we often talk about this with like PBS Kids shows, like they would be the thing on whenever you went to like a doctor's office or something. Law and Order is up there with that. Like every time you went in to like get your hair cut or something like, or you'd sit down to wait for your car to get fixed. Like Law and Order was one of those even keel shows that they could put on that the person sitting at the desk could stand to listen to all day, plus anybody sitting in the waiting room, right? So like that is the level at which Law and Order kind of pervaded my life. Like I also had like versions of that show that were like week to week watching for me. The early days of D'Onofrio on Criminal Intent, were like huge like week to week episodes for me. So like I've come in and out of like, I guess you would call it fandom for Law and Order for sure. When Ice-T first started, everybody wanted to watch and that kind of thing. But it is a show that is, like you're saying, was just always there. It was just
it's eponymous. It's a background noise show. So it was weird when it got canceled, but like Special Victims Unit was still going on.
Right.
It was just one of those things that sort of affected life. So, of course, I want to watch the reboot of it. And it's been out for 4 weeks, and I've only watched the first episode. And I might only watch the first episode of this rejoining Law and Order already in progress, which I think is also kind of cool, that this is the 21st season of Law and Order, not the first season of a Law and Order reboot. That they've literally put it under the same banner. It's very cool to me. So I watched the first episode, their reemergence episode, and Law and Order is one of those shows that was famous for being ripped from the headlines, right?
I mean, I think they kind of started that whole thing.
I think that's a Dick Wolfism.
I guess that's not true. I guess like Dragnet and stuff way back in the day, and Adam 12 used to talk about how they would use real stuff, but they over the top leaned into some really.
Actually, I think of FBI, especially the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that version of FBI that Leo DiCaprio's character has like a guest spot on.
And Car 54, way back in the day.
But FBI, like that opened with, these are real files from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Things have been changed, blah, blah, blah. But also Dragnet, right? The names have been changed to protect the innocent. The rest of the facts are presented exactly as they occurred. It's a thing that they did. But Law and Order sort of made it their brand in the 90s again, that we're ripping from the headlines.
Right.
And I do not remember a disclaimer before the episode. I always remember them after the episode. So this one starts with a disclaimer before the episode, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's Law and Order time. And, this is fictional. This is not meant to represent any real people. And then the story is basically Bill Cosby, XB, Harry King.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
And even though he's been in prison, he's been released from prison. And he goes on a morning show, which, come on, NBC, really? You got skeletons in your own closet, and talks about how he's innocent and he's always been innocent and he maintains that. And these 40 women who accused him of rape are just flat out wrong. And then, cut to him shot 4 times in the chest and once in the dick. And they need to find the person who did it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, okay, so that's classic Law and Order, right? And that felt very good. The reason why I wanted you to watch it, and the reason why I'm probably going to stop watching the new Law and Order, I think I'll give another episode a chance, and if I do, I'll probably share my experience with that as well, is it's now 2022. So the relationship between the viewer and the police force is a bit different than it was in the 90s. Which is sort of the safest way that I can say that.
Okay. Yeah.
Without trying to be like too over the top or dramatic. Like there's been a shift, so to say. And that is represented by Jeffrey Donovan of Burn Notice fame being the new detective. And he's kind of doing like his best Jerry Orbach. And I'm like, well, that's good that he's trying that. And then they have a discussion, he and Anthony Anderson, about like, I'm going to speak my mind and I'm going to be true about it. And I think it's bullshit that as a cop now, I'm one wrong word away from losing my job. It's because of these freaking cameras and all like, and he's just going off with like pro-police propaganda that makes the show, it kind of gives it this air of like, oh my God, like what's happening here? Like, I understand that you're going to do it, but like, this is a weird platform for it, right? I think the better way to handle it is just good cops kind of doing their job, not having this guy be outspoken about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird space to be in, because on the one hand, like, if you're going to have a show that highlights the life of police officers in 2022, I think it's a disservice to your audience to not address the like the shit attitude of it all. Like, I like the whole authoritative nature of the police force, and you know, the like we don't have to get into like the racist history of why police exist in this country, but like the idea being that like that you can't ignore that is part of, I mean, let's be honest, part of the job at this point, right? Yeah. And so I don't know if I'm really on board with the idea that they should not address it at all. That being said, what a way to address it. Jesus. As pointed out earlier, I have not seen it, but the idea being that like if the whole thing is just like an apologetic like tirade about like we should just trust cops, like no. That's not.
So other shows like The Rookie, which is another like week to week cop show, sort of in the veins of like Hill Street Blues or NYPD Blue, from that, where it's just like here's your group of cops and this is their job for the day. Yeah. They've done a really good job with the fact that like they'll go to situations, they'll obviously be people there with cell phones and they'll address it, but they've never had anyone be like, this fucking sucks. It sucks to be a cop now, because of accountability from these people. And then even backstabs, and he's like, but honestly, I like the accountability, because it means that good guys are watched doing the right thing, and maybe we weed out some of the bad ones. Like, it was very weird. I believe in both points of this thing. It didn't work at all. And the Anthony Anderson being like, you came at him kind of hot. He got out his badge and said, hi, we have some questions for you. And the kid, like, gave him attitude and walked away. And it's not like he put hands on him. He just followed him. And then a bunch of, cameras came out. Like, it was weird, the dichotomy that they tried to have in this one scene that made me be like, maybe this isn't where I'm going to get entertainment from anymore. and I'm kind of okay with that. Yeah. But then the one step beyond is they find the woman, and it was one of the women that he had been raped by Harry King, and she had shot him, and they have her in interrogation. And again, it's Jeffrey Donovan's character, Frank Cosgrove, who is sitting there, and he's saying, like, you can tell us what happened. The DA, no one's going to want to prosecute this, right? It's going to be difficult to arrest you on this one just because of he essentially, like, bold-faced lied to this woman in order to coerce a confession from her. And it's just like, oh my God, that's gross. But also, it's completely legal for the police to do that. Yeah. It's legal for the police to say, we have video evidence of what happened. Why don't you tell us in your own words? Which was essentially what it boiled down to. And she's like, well, you already have the video. I don't know why you need my thing. And he's like, because we want to hear your story. We're not going to prosecute you. How could we? You took care of a bad man.
Did this woman have a lawyer in the room with her?
No, she did not have a lawyer in the room with her. And she had never asked for a lawyer either.
Lawyer up, everybody. Just rule number one. Just shut up and lawyer up.
Yeah, because anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. But yeah, so that whole thing. So that's the law side of it. So then we go to the order side of it, and now Sam Waterston is the DA, which is excellent because he was an ADA for so long on regular Law and Order. So it's nice that he eventually becomes the DA of New York City, right. And he has this new guy that he brought in to be a better prosecutor, right? That, like, we're actually looking at the law, we're making sure that the people we're sending to jail are actually guilty and all this other stuff, right? And he's like, I don't think we should use the confession because it was coerced. And then he's like, I saw the confession guy. It's clean. He's like, but they lied, and they kind of blatantly lied to her. And he's like, well, are lies not okay? What if it was a white lie? What if they said that they have 5 witnesses, but really they only have 4? And it's another whole thing about, like, how prosecutors and prosecutorial misconduct are, like, just part of the job to make sure that bad guys go to jail. And it was another thing that just kind of was hard to watch.
Yeah, it's
Especially,
not fun anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, what you're speaking to is the idea of like the privilege of distance, right?
Yeah.
Like when we are far enough away from a problem, we can acknowledge it exists and enjoy like somebody exploring it and asking these questions because let's be honest, they're rhetorical, right? So watching Law and Order in the 90s as a young like 7 or 8 year old white kid, like I had no connection. All I knew is cops are good guys, you know, criminals are bad guys, blah blah blah. That's it, right? So watching them do this stuff, it would be like, oh, it's interesting that this one's pushing the envelope, but also what does that mean in the larger context? And Law and Order was one of the first shows to really consider that kind of stuff, to ask that kind of question of like, well, the cop did this, how is that going to affect the trial here and stuff like that. And that was always interesting then, but I had the privilege of being of these kinds of issues that they're ripping from the headlines being so far removed from me, literally by the distance of space, because these were always happening in like New York City, right? And that was not where I lived. But then on top of that, there is also this idea that like these are problems that I just don't experience in my everyday life. And so watching somebody parse them out and talk about them and break them out was easy to consume. But here we are now in 2022, and we've all kind of realized that this is all of our problem. I don't necessarily want to watch a bunch of actors and a bunch of writers and a bunch of TV execs try and tell me like the facts about the situation, because all I've learned for the last 30 years is that they never get them right.
Yeah. And there's a thing that I said where I'm like, this is how they're going to fight against that. And that's exactly what they did. And I'm like, I don't know the law. I could not be a lawyer right now, but TV law, I definitely like understand.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And then the other discussion is the fact that, it's hard enough for cops right now because of all these things, but you need to understand that there are partners. And it came from the cop side that the prosecutors are our partners, and then from the prosecutors, we're partners with the police. We have to work in tandem in order to keep the streets safe. And it's just like, this is so weird. Like, This is me inviting propaganda into my house for an hour on things that, like, we're still not certain how things are going to go. Hearing Sam Waterston say, there are people out there who want to defund them, for God's sakes. And it's like, yeah, this is weird. I can't really enjoy it. And then to go a step further, because that guy, he's an idealist, so he says, I'm not going to use the confession, to the fact that he goes to the judge and says, we agree that we're not going to use the confession at all in our argument and our prosecution of this defender. And then it becomes a big thing when Frank's on the stand and he's like, well, other than all the evidence that I've pointed to, there's the fact that she confessed to it. And it turns into a whole problem that he brought it up, even though there was affidavit saying they wouldn't. Which, so then rightfully the defense attorney's like, I call for a mistrial. And let's be honest, breaking something like that, that's grounds for a mistrial. But then the judge is like, no, I honestly think he just didn't realize it was happening. So we're going to continue with this. And it's just like, none of this is making me make me feel the way I used to feel watching Law and Order.
I mean, you know, cop shows in general have become really, really hard to consume, and like they were such a huge genre for American television. And I mean, they still are. But I mean, like, this even happens to shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Yeah. I like when I really start thinking about Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like there are some squishy episodes of that show that are just hard to watch nowadays. Like the number one episode that always comes to mind for me is the one where Jake arrests the guy without any evidence, and they have like 48 hours to like prove the guy did it, and it's like the ticking clock is that they have to actually prove that Jake did the right thing, and it's just like, but he didn't though. Like the fact that the end of that episode is him getting away with what he did is a horrendous actual plot line for that show.
Yeah, I watched that episode yesterday, ironically enough, not even related to the fact that I do it. We've been throwing Brooklyn Nine-Nine on in the background while we're playing games, like where we're doing video game stuff. Yeah. And that one came on and I'm just like, the first season of this show was very different from what this show became. Yeah. Because like, I don't want to keep watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine after watching this episode where Jake just on a hunch arrested this guy. And then
let's paint the real picture.
Yeah.
Like the upshot white rookie cop, well, not rookie, but like younger cop, like just on a whim just arrests a black guy because he has a bad feeling about him. It's just a weird.
Well, I mean, it is his MO as well. Like not to defend it, but they do just make, it's not just Jake's like, I'm going to arrest this guy because I feel like he did it. Like, there is some grounds for it, but not grounds enough for an arrest. Grounds enough to look into the guy, not enough to actually take him in.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a weird episode.
It's a weird episode of the show. And it's even weirder while we're talking on top of this. But then at the end of the episode, this is the worst part, right? Because they feel bad that they're prosecuting this woman who was raped. And, like, it doesn't matter. We can present all the facts in the world. At the end of the day, the jury sympathizes with what she did. And they lie a bunch of times. Like, the defense, the wife of the guy said that she was at home. It's found that she wasn't at home. She was drinking at a bar. And then she acts as an alibi for that woman. And it's just like, well, that's a bold-faced lie. But you can't say it. You can't prove that it's perjury despite all the other facts, right? It's all just word against word. It was awful. Like, that whole thing was just awful. But then the saving grace, the Deus Ex Machina, is the assistant DA's assistant, like his clerk, his second chair. She does the impassioned speech closing argument about how 4 years ago my sister was raped and I wanted to go get revenge for it, but I didn't do it because that's against the law. And that's what leads the jury to convict this woman of murder too, which I have to say, that was the one thing I actually liked about it. I hate when I watch shows and they try to give someone the maximum charge because, like, on that level, you're probably going to lose. But, like, charging this woman with murder too, there's a lot less reasonable doubt there. I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, murder one, you have to confirm, like, the conspiracy to commit.
You just play one on TV.
The TV law, I understand that. But I do dig that. I dig when they get that part of it right. Sorry, that's not even part of it. What this show can't be is every week a Deus Ex Machina because the one diverse person on the order side of things is related to everything that has a personal story connected to what happened to sway the jury.
Yeah.
And the reason why I was like, you need to watch this and all this is, it's a weird out of the fucking gate episode of Law and Order, right? 4 episodes in, right? Maybe halfway through the season, doing an episode like this would make sense.
Yeah.
But it being the first episode out of the gate, and like Frank Cosgrove, like the introduction to his character is that he's kind of a on the edge, pushing the limit cop, is so weird. Because I'm not going to root for him in any way, shape, or form. Just like it's hard for me to root for, like, Sam Waterston being like, no, lies should be okay, right? Because it's in pursuit of justice, and it's like, no, you're also sort of ruining the legacy of the show. Also because Jamie Ross, who was one of the other prosecutors early on in the show, it turns out that she had consulted with this woman about, like, I'm going to go murder him because he doesn't care about it. And then when they put her on the stand, she's like, I plead the fifth. And it's just like, so now you've ruined her legacy too, because she kind of conspiracy to commit murder with this woman.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck, Law and Order?
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, you've really shown that these people that we held up as like bastions of law and order are not. And so I guess good on that front, maybe. That's a weird, yeah, man.
Right, but there are no consequences for any of these people who are like knocked down a few pegs.
Yeah. Well, as real as possible, ripped from the headlines.
Yeah, so that's why. It was just a weird out-of-the-gate episode of it. And it really kind of hit me, too, because, like, oh, we're going to go with this particular thing. That's also still kind of being dealt with, right? It's not like celebrities getting away with rape of women. It's something that's been dealt with, and it's probably something that will never be dealt with, like, but it's still happening. It's not...
Yeah.
I don't know. And that also kind of feels like the territory of SVU. It doesn't feel like the territory of regular Law and Order is the last thing.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like SVU, Criminal Intent, stuff like that. Like they used those shows in order to tell much more specialized, to be like to to use the word, like stories, right? And to that point, like multi-episode long like explorations of these things and looking into these facets, and like so to cram it all into like not just an episode, but the first episode, it gets even weirder, because if you look at the ways in which Law and Order as art, like as television goes, they've already done stuff like this in better ways than what you're describing here. So like the fact that they've kind of gone backwards both in terms of the ways that they would look at the real world and look at their own world is weird.
Yeah. The weirdest thing about Law and Order, and this is not the new one, this is just the show in general, is if you go back to earlier episodes, how predictive they were about like certain crimes and how prevalent they would end up being in this country is also really eerie. Like I have an
I think
episode,
it's more of I think it's more of a fact, and this is the same thing that people say with The Simpsons all the time, right?
Yeah.
As The Simpsons predicted this, is it's not necessarily that they predicted it so much as that like we just kind of didn't realize how prevalent it was, and certain people working in these spheres did. And the reason they make these shows, the reason that Law and Order existed from, again, the artistic standpoint, is that the people working behind the scenes on this show wanted people in the rest of the country to truly understand that this is something that is happening frequently in this area of the country. When we say ripped from the headlines, we mean literally more than once this headline has appeared in front of us in a newspaper.
It's not ripped from the headline, it's ripped from the headlines plural. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know. Also, so while we're still talking about TV, a little bit more levity before we get into our gaming exploits this week. This was a weak week of sitcoms. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's a weird time of the year.
Yeah, so that's the question I want. I wanted to posit a question to you and see what your opinion of it is. Do you think that they put like the weaker episodes against something like March Madness, or do you think that they should like hold strong ones for it?
Oh, I mean,
like I know like how sweeps and everything works, but I mean every episode of television this week, like the sitcom ones that aired while March Madness games were going on, they were some of the like worst episodes of television I've ever seen.
I mean, I think there's definitely an idea that this is not going to be the one to watch is definitely part of it. Here, let me put it this way. I'd rather not assume that people out there have a weak episode that they're aware of and just like, man, let's fart this one out. Like, I like to assume that everybody working on every show is putting 110% in. Do I think that that's actually happening? Of course not. But
well, even putting 110% in, there's going to be strong episodes and weak episodes.
Yeah, but the problem is that depending on how the storytelling on your show goes, and maybe this will dictate it, right? Yeah. Is that if it's a sitcom that has a floating timeline, then you kind of can't get away with just putting any episode you want on. Like you can't look back on 30 episodes for the season and think, well, these are the weaker ones, so we'll put them on during the Olympics or the Super Bowl or blah blah blah. Like you don't get to do that. Like your shows are dictated in a certain way. Now, shows can be built that way. There's definitely we've seen some weird stuff that has happened where like Superstore going up against the Olympics.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Not
Superstore going up against the Olympics. Superstore getting spotlit by the Olympics.
Yeah, even weirder. Yeah. But that kind of stuff can definitely happen. That's what I mean. Is like I like to think that every episode of every show, like there's a hope that it's the good one. But yeah, we know that doesn't happen.
I guess it was just because we had, since it's been the March Madness stuff, there hasn't been a lot of new shows. Yeah. So as a family, we've caught up on almost everything except for Superman and Lois. We have 7 episodes of that show still. And I'm excited for this new episode, this new season, but it's still kind of hard to watch that one every so often.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it's just one of those ones. And watching the like 4 sitcoms in a row and all of them kind of not being the best work. I mean, the one that was the best, and it's only happened in retrospect for me, because guess what? We're recording this the day that the Oscars air, and I didn't know that the Oscars were happening tonight. I completely forgot about the Oscars. To me, the Oscars happened 4 weeks ago in February. I don't know why they're a March thing now. It's because of the Olympics, but whatever. And
not
also
just the Olympics, also COVID and everything. Yeah. They pushed everything back a month, and it actually became like a weird thing because people were like, is this going to change what's allowed? And they never really answered that question.
They never answered that question. That's a good point. So the Oscars are happening tonight, and so then in retrospect, the fact that one of the main storylines in Mr. Mayor of the last week was about how the unhoused numbers in LA are based on a count done on Oscar night didn't really hit until I realized, oh, Oscar night is this Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay, so you guys, that one felt like they did their tie-in work, right? Mr.
Right.
Mayor is probably my favorite new show right now. Season 2 is only 2 episodes deep. It has not grabbed me the way that season 1 did, and I'm actually really upset that season 1 has been ripped from all of the streaming platforms. I don't understand that. I don't understand why they do that in this world where you could have it available. It is NBC.
Weird that it's not just on Peacock. Their like whole like shtick about Peacock being just the place to get all of your media from them, and to not put that up. That is wild. That is a really weird concept. I don't know what the business think is behind that.
I don't understand Peacock at all, because a bunch of the times there's a problem with Pam, I think is what the show is called. It's Renee Zellweger's new thing. We'll cover it next February probably, just because of we love Renee Zellweger on the show in February.
Only in February, though.
Only in February. The other 11 months are for other people, like Zack Snyder in March, which we'll get to. Sorry. Like that show, like everything I saw, like only on Peacock, and it's also on Hulu. So I don't know why all the marketing is only on Peacock, but it's also on Hulu.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, NBC with Peacock is sort of squandering what they could do with it, because we've seen people go to Paramount for the CBS shows and then all of the original stuff that Paramount Plus is delivering.
Yeah, they don't seem to have the same chutzpah that CBS did when they basically were just like, no, we're not going to put our stuff up anywhere. You come to us if you want our stuff. Like, and that was something that we pointed out many times was a bold move, but one that paid off. So, like, you can't really blame them for it. Yeah. But NBC doesn't seem to want to do that same move.
Yeah, and so, like, the fact that, like, catch up on Peacock or new episodes weekly on Hulu, like, then that's, like, you have an option. Like, that's how I would try to sell something like Peacock to people while they're watching Mr. Mayor on just regular TV.
Yeah, we didn't get too deep into it, but the way they handled the Olympics was weird too, because like rather than just say buy Peacock, get the Olympics, they were like, or you can kind of get this half-ass package that lets you just watch just the Olympics for the month that they're out, and then once they're done, it's done. It's like, why would you do that? The Olympics is your draw to your
platform, and then people are watching Saved by the Bell
to avoid your platform.
Yeah, it's what they've done with it is just very strange. And then again, I'm like, well, I imagine it'll still be on Peacock, but then the number of shows, like what Peacock could truly be, Perfect Harmony, Sunny Side, all these shows that like failed after one season.
Studio 60 was them too, right?
Yeah, Studio 60 was an NBC. Put them on to Peacock, so that people who get it for the new stuff get to explore your backlog and then are there, right? It can't just be the destination for The Office, because as you've proven, that's not doing anything for you. Especially when you have the Office only package, which is just like that Olympics package.
Weird. So wild.
It's so... I constantly am baffled by the choices of Peacock. But yeah, Mr. Mayor was the strongest of a week of sitcoms, where like The Neighborhood did an Out of Space and Time episode where we were introduced. It's sort of like that episode of Seinfeld that everybody's like, I don't understand this episode. Who are all these new people? They did that for an episode of The Neighborhood. And it's like, you have such a robusto cast of characters in the show. Yeah. And not just like of the main cast, like it's a neighborhood, so you have people coming in and out of the world to make it feel like that neighborhood environment.
Yeah, I thought the whole shtick of that show was kind of the ensemble part of it, right? Like it's not just it's more of a rules of engagement than it is like an Everybody Loves Raymond style thing, right? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's exciting. So for them to introduce a new couple to have like a cheating storyline was very strange. And it's like, I have no connection to these people. If it were one of the other couples that we know from the show, then it would mean something.
I mean, like, this is going to be telling, though, is if in 3 episodes, if they introduce these people as if you've never met them before, and then suddenly they're like a major part of the show, this will tell you that what they did was pluck a week episode and put it on during March Madness, which you could very well find out. So I'll be very interested to see if they ever do anything again with these particular people in this episode, because if you find out later on that, like, they are introduced and you're like, oh, so this episode that they played 2 months ago is actually supposed to slot in here, then you'll know, oh, they did exactly that.
They did exactly. It was kind of a weaker episode. People aren't interested in that. Yeah, it's we'll find out. I don't think that's the case. I think it's gonna be like that homeless girl that Zach Morris saved in that Christmas episode of Saved by the Bell. Never heard from or seen again because Zach sacrificed her to the god in order to keep his charisma levels at max.
God, nobody ever wants to talk about whatever happened to that Cosby kid that went up the stairs.
Or Family Matters. Or Chuck fucking Cunningham. Speaking of Family Matters, and this is going to be my last transition point, whenever someone brings up the Full House theme song, I get the Family Matters song stuck in my head, and it's really hard for me to differentiate between those two things.
I couldn't even, like, if you sang the Family Matters theme song, I'd be like, oh, right, the Family Matters theme song. But you said Full House, and I immediately was like, whatever happened to?
Yeah, whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh, what's Family Matters? It's something like that, and it's like, but it's a rare condition this day and age to read any good news on a newspaper page. And it has been a thing that has happened to me annually since 2010. Where, like, I will just have, like, a day where those two songs cannot be differentiated in my head. And then just and then just to fuck things up, sometimes Step by Step wanders in. And it's like, is it this one? And I'm like, no, that's Step by Step. Get out of here, Cody. Go live in your van.
I start singing Gummy Bears, and it's all over.
But, yeah, so that's
Tanner, bouncing here and there and everywhere.
Stop. It's already dead.
You got it, dude.
Oh, man. Okay, yeah. So that's TV, but I was curious if you had thoughts on the fact that, like, do we put weaker episodes against strong television when people might not be watching?
I think we have seen plenty of instances of that throughout television history, where episodes clearly are out of place in the ways in which they're shown for various reasons. I mean, Fox is notorious for this. I mean, the ways in which that if a show's not doing well, they will dig into the kind of the history or the coming episodes and see if there's maybe a quote unquote strong one to put out there and stuff like that. And it can really screw stuff up, you know, like when they do that sort of stuff. So like I don't doubt that there is some math going on there for exactly this kind of stuff. It's disappointing because what that is pure studio interference. There's no way that like the artists involved are like, this is the way we want to do this, because that just it just ends up biting the show in the ass in the end, in the long run. I don't know if I've ever heard of an instance of that happening and people thinking that was a good move.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, speaking of Fox interference, and then we'll move on to the games that we played this week, all these new games. Enlisted, the show that, like, Christopher Lowell, who plays Jesse on How I Met Your Father, it was sort of like his first bigger sitcom-y role that he had.
He was like was it a three-person? Was it a
it was Jeff Stoltz. It was a three-hander. Okay. Well, it was kind of a four-hander because Keith David was there, but he was sort of the anchor character. And then you had Jeff Stoltz, you had Christopher Lowell, and then you had the guy who's playing on United States of Al, the former Marine. I can't think of his name, and I feel really bad about it. But he's the one that, like, I know him from Al, and I only knew him from Al. Whereas, like, Jeff Stoltz I knew from other stuff, and Christopher Lowell I knew was going to be in How I Met Your Father. So it was this interesting thing that I, like, kind of jumped into it. And they showed the 7th episode of that series as the 2nd episode of that series. And in it, Christopher Lowell's dating a woman that he doesn't start dating until, like, the 4th episode of the show in actual order of how it was meant to be shown.
Exactly. That's what I was saying, right? It's like when timeline stuff like that comes into play, it can really screw with stuff. Yeah. And like, the biggest offender whenever I think about timeline problems is Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, where so many first season episodes were turned into second season episodes, and like the apartment is different. Yeah, I mean, you know, the historically the worst offender of that is something like Firefly, where they straight up didn't show the pilot until after they had canceled the show, which is just insane.
Considering it establishes everything,
for everything,
literally everything. It's really weird to jump into that show without it. All right, so that's enough TV talk. Oh, you talk some TV? I talk some TV. Let's talk games, and let's talk Borderlands first. What did you play? How is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands?
Oh my god.
Sejohn?
Okay, so Facts and caveats beforehand. For anybody that never listened to the show before, if you're new to this, I guess I should point out that like Borderlands is like a tried and true series for me. I am somebody that has been there since the first game and has fallen in love and played all of them subsequently, and in various ways and various forms. Like I'm a sucker for these games. So like complete and totally biased. Like let's make that clear. So I bought this game and I'll be entirely honest, bought in on the whole like full package because as Devon has rightly pointed out in the past, the ways in which the Borderlands games are treated and the ways in which the DLC and stuff is put out there, while it is a very clear-cut, clean way in which DLC and stuff like that is approached, it is still a money grab. It is one of the biggest like offenders of just like pay us more money and we promise that we'll keep feeding your addiction style games. And so, for good or for ill, whether or not you want to buy into that, because then inevitably what ends up happening with all of these games is that a year from now it'll be free on PlayStation. So like, why are you going to spend $100 on the game plus everything that's coming out now when you're going to be able to grab the entire thing in a year for literally it's the old like why not just wait for it to be $5 at GameStop argument. And
my exact quote, because I'm proud of it, I'm going to share it, was, I'm going to wait till they're paying me to play Tiny Tina's Wonderland.
So that's like, that is definitely fair. And I'm a firm believer in the idea that like, yeah, if you're not sure about a game, if you're not fully on board with the series, like don't give it your money. That's just common sense, right? So like stop pre-ordering shit is like kind of the moral of that story. But like, for me, Borderlands is one of the few series where, no, I know I'm going to at least have an amount of fun with this game, so I'm just going to buy into it. And if I hit one where it really kind of rubs me the wrong way, I can have new feelings about that pre-sequel. But like, that's not then the history with every one of these games. So when Tiny Tina was announced, I was full on board. The other part of that is that, so for anybody that doesn't know, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is the new Borderlands game, and it is actually a wider exploration of a DLC pack that they did for Borderlands 2, where you did Bunkers and Badasses, the Dungeons and Dragons style game played within Borderlands. So it's cool. So it's like Dungeons and Dragons, but there's guns, right? And in the original DLC, there was a lot of really interesting stuff in it because in addition to the fact that like it was D&D with guns, and they were trying to apply a lot of that, you had a lot of your favorite characters that were playing D&D, and it was at a time when D&D was blowing up. But also the entire DLC that this was based on was also right after 2, and it was all about Tiny Tina as a character narratively. The way this fits in, dealing with the death of Rowan. What's his name? How did I forget his name?
Rowan is his name. Yeah, Rowan is his name.
But anyway, so it's this whole idea of like, at the time, a young character, I think in the original, in 2, she's only supposed to be like 13 or 14, and even that might be too old. But her also kind of dealing with like death and the loss of a friend, and them all kind of helping her come to terms with it, and how she uses fantasy and blah, blah, blah. So like, if Borderlands has any deeper meaning, and if anybody out there wants to tell me that just doesn't exist, I'm not gonna. I can't argue with you. Like I have a lot of deep feelings about this series, but anybody out there that points to it and is just like, they like to be dumb just to be dumb, like, you're totally right. But if there ever was a moment where they got into some really deep shit, it was in that DLC. So to that point, a lot of people fell in love with it. A lot of fans fell in love with it. A lot of people that never really played Borderlands fell in love with it. And then last year, what they did is they even broke that DLC out into its own freestanding game. So for like $10-15, you could just buy just that and just play that. And again, it hit pretty well. So they've expanded it into its own full game in this Wonderlands game. And so I picked it up. I've only played the first 3 or 4 hours because it's only been out for a day, and I'm not the kind of guy that can sit down for 12 hours and just bang through stuff. But in that time, I spent more time character creating than I did playing yet, because they have gone full on D&D, like full on RPG, to the point where like I was changing eyebrows, I was changing ear size and like eye size and stuff like that. But what's even crazier is like, what's cool about it is they have taken the Borderlands sensibility of just over the top ridiculousness and applied it to that sort of stuff. So there's actually like an overcharge button. Like you can go into the character creator and you can get through the entire character creator, and then right at the end there's a switch that says, do you want to allow overdrive on sliders? And I was like, oh no. as an avid Monster Factory fan, I was like, is this what this is that what this is gonna be? So I click it on, and sure enough, what they let you do at that moment is they take the end of each slider and expand it by about 20% in each direction. So suddenly, like, I'm laughing because I had already put kind of tiny eyes on my character, but now I can basically make them disappear. Or like my ears, I can make my entire head just a set of ears and things like that. Like, so you can just go out of your, like, it is ridiculous. So I spent like 2 hours just playing with the character creator and trying all sorts of different stuff. And there's really good stuff in terms of like your background and how that's going to affect stats, and you get into some really deep like RPG elements before you even get into the game. And then the first 2 hours of that game, and when you're actually playing it, are just amazing. I mean, first of all, you're introduced to three major characters right away. The first played by Will Arnett, the next played by not Adam Sandler, Andy Samberg, little Adam Sandler, Andy Samberg,
his
and
boy.
then the other Wanda Sykes, right? Not to mention that you have Tiny Tina, who's played by what's her name?
Tara Reid.
Quinn. Yeah, Tara Reid. So like you also have Tara Reid who's narrating the whole thing. Like it's so there's just this level of production on this one that is above and beyond, like, too. So I'm in love, right? And you're going through and playing D&D, so there's also this really interesting concept where the characters that you are playing with are people kind of from within the world, at least as far as I can tell right now. I'm interested to hear more about like the overworld versus the game world, because there's a lot of dichotomy between the two right now. Like on the one hand, it starts with you sitting down at a table with three people, and like there's a D&D style hex board in front of you with with figures and stuff on it, and there's rule books on the table and stuff, and that all looks really cute. But then like you're in the world, and you're in this fantasy world, and you're fighting stuff. The other thing about it is there's a real element to it about like there's a real risk reward element that like Borderlands has really prided itself on, not always gotten right, but really prided itself on the idea, like the number of guns that are available and how you get those guns, and and the fact that there's not real limits to stats on guns. So like in a Destiny game, this is a huge thing where like you can go through a special raid, get a special gun, and then you have that really special gun, and in the moment it's probably the most powerful gun available in the game. 2 months later they put out a new raid, and that old gun is worthless because they've upped the level on everything else. That old gun is never going to match it, blah blah blah. Whereas in Borderlands, the ways in which guns and special like attributes to weapons and armor pieces and all that stuff, the ways in which that stuff levels with you has always been something that they've been very adamant about, to the point where like by the end of Borderlands 2, like you could be like level I think 80 or 85, and like the off of what was originally like a 50 level game, and then on top of that like guns and stuff were just doing such ridiculous damage that you were just melting people. And so I'm excited to see how far they go with that in this, because right away, like I was handed like the normal no attributes gun to get through stuff, but then like 2 minutes later I opened up a chest and found a gun that was 1,000 times better, and I like literally like I went from a gun that was doing 200 damage to a gun that was doing 200,000 damage, and I was just like, oh okay. And like they even like make a joke about like opening chests to find better stuff than what you're gonna just be handed sometimes, and like that's funny, but also something that usually people will complain about. So like you don't get to like wipe that away with like a joke, but we'll see what they do with in the game. But I'm in love with it, because like I said, like I've never been able to spend this much time in any type of character creation with a Borderlands game, because usually it's 4 or 5 stock characters to begin with, and yeah, there's color palettes and stuff you can play with, and certain costumes depending on what you own, what has been out. I think by the time all is said and done with Borderlands 3, I think that they had put out 4 or 5 different DLCs, and each of them came with costumes and stuff like that, and then on top of that different like textures and things and all that. So that was fun, but not nearly on the level that the character creation in the new one is. So it's just been really wild, because I was curious how they were going to differentiate this game from the main series, because on the one hand, not so much, because I still want to be playing a Borderlands game when I come to this, right? But on the other hand, it is distinctly not a Borderlands game. It is Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So like right now, there's been no mention of a vault. They don't call you a vault hunter. They don't. There's no sense that you're going up against some unknown alien force somewhere. There's been no mention of anybody like a Handsome Jack or anything like that yet, right? So like I am so losing a lot of that stuff has been kind of expected, but like hitting me more than I thought it would. But then the ways in which they're kind of replacing a lot of that stuff with different things in this D&D style setting is kind of rad. So I don't know if this game is going to hit for anybody that doesn't love Borderlands, because a lot of the humor that I'm finding in it right now is the ways in which they're twisting that Borderlands understanding, that Borderlands aesthetic. And so I think that there's more than enough people that enjoy that series, that it's not that I think like the game is going to fail because of this. I just don't know if I could personally recommend this game to somebody that was not already kind of in on that joke.
Yeah, I'm mad at you, is what I'm going to say, because you've made this game sound hyper appealing.
I mean, like,
and that's good. Like, that's
yeah, for me, this is the fantasy shooter like that I want to be playing. Like Elden Ring sounds appealing to me in a way of which I can wait for it, but I do want to put my hands on it one day. This is going to be the game where I'm like, I'm going to go up against bosses for 3 hours and I'm going to turn it onto super hard mode because you get more rewards that way, and it's worth it to me to die over and over again to figure out how to do it and then get that stuff.
Yeah, because as much as like Borderlands 3, the reason why the bloom went off that roast me, I've used that phrase too many times this week, but it's very...
Like we might need it to be the name of the episode.
Oh, but I really liked... I had something else I wanted to use, but I guess that I've forgotten it, so it doesn't really matter. I was so amped for that day where we played Borderlands 3 when it released, took the day off, we got into it and we played it, and I really enjoyed it. Borderlands 3 was a really cool way to continue the world after the death of Handsome Jack. Yeah. And it was interesting that the mythical figure was De Leon as opposed to like a villainous man like Handsome Jack.
Right.
It was really cool. And then like the ways that it commented on our current world and streaming as entertainment with the twins, like Borderlands 3 was a really grand experience for me. But then what really bummed me out about it was the fact that 2 weeks later, it was $20 for the exact same thing that I had paid for. And I don't mean $20 in like stores. I mean like a digital download of the game had gone down to $20.
Yeah, I again, like, I don't know what the business math is on some of the stuff sometimes, and I don't know why these companies will do what they do, especially when it comes to this sort of stuff. Because the same thing happened with the DLC, Bunkers and Badasses DLC, for 2, when they broke it out into its own game. It was this whole thing about how, like, you know, that it was a beloved DLC, and we knew that they were working on Wonderlands, but we didn't quite know when it was coming. So to like fill the gap, they were like, we're going to offer this thing that's going to be standalone. You don't need to own 2 in order to play this game anymore. And that was cool. But then like literally the next week it was free on PlayStation Plus, which like what the as somebody that already owned it, like it didn't really hit me that hard, and it was cool to get it on its own free from PlayStation Plus. But I could totally understand anybody out there that was like sold this $20, $30 product. Like I don't even remember how much it was on its own.
$20, I think.
$20, yeah. But sold this $20 product 1 week, and then the next week being told, hey, you could have waited a week and gotten it for free. That's definitely a kick in the nuts.
Oh, I know that kick in the nuts, because I went out and I don't want to talk about it this episode, but I want more time with it. But I own an Xbox Series S now, and the reason for that is Tunic, leading up to its release, everything said this is not going to be on Game Pass. This is going to be a game that you have to buy. Yeah. Like, even Microsoft was like, this isn't going to be a Game Pass game. We're charging for this game. So I'm like, okay, well, if I have to buy it, I want to buy it and put it on something, and I don't want to lug around my Series X to other TVs. The beauty of the Series S is just how portable it is.
Right.
It is honestly meant to compete with something like the Nintendo Switch. And I mean, not just in price, but in the fact that it's like a size of a sheet of paper. Like, it's sort of a ream of paper. That's what it reminds me of looking at a Series S. So it's really easy to move it from like room to room if you have to. And you don't have the dock, but you know, all you need is an HDMI cable and a power cord. And it's probably the HDMI cable and power cord for what's already hooked up to your TV. It's just a quick, you know, unplug and replug in.
Yeah.
So I did that because I'll download it and then I can move it around the house, right? But then, oh no, it's on Game Pass. And I'm like, so I did this for no reason, right? Like,
yeah, no, I mean, it is the world in which we live in currently with the idea of streaming platforms for games is kind of wild, because like they try to compete with the idea with like streaming movie services, right? Like GameFly and their whole like we're the Netflix of video games and all that. Like it doesn't quite work because it's not a one-to-one because like let's point at like Borderlands like or Wonderlands. It is a $60 game, or for me more because I bought like the whole package.
It's a $70 game. Let's not forget that games have gone up in price.
If you're getting it on the PS5, it's a $70 game. Yeah, like that whole thing too. But that idea that it is a much more expensive buy-in than it is for me to pick up a $20 movie from Walmart on day of release when it comes out. And the idea that, oh, I could buy a physical copy, but why would I when there's a streaming version of it available? Like that math is very different when it's $20 compared to the $10 I'm already paying for Netflix each month, or hell, at this point, $20 I'm paying each month for Netflix, right? So like there's that math versus the whole like, yeah, eventually this might be free for 1 month on PlayStation. If I miss it, it's not going to be available to me. But at the same time, I don't really have $80, $70, $90 to spend on this thing right now. Or for you, like buying the whole S, like what was that, like 200 and something?
It's like $300.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like, and I compared it to a Switch, and I looked at it, and I'm like, I'm not really playing my Xbox, and the reason is I have it set up in one location. Yeah. And I wanted to see what the S was about, and Zach owned it, and he told me about how big it was, and that, and I'm like, oh, it sounds movable, it sounds portable, and it is. I'm very happy that I got one. I've completely changed my tune to the fact that like it's unnecessary, just get an X. There's a market and a reason to get the Series S Xbox.
Yeah.
And it's to play these modern games. Like I could play Borderlands on it, the Tiny Tina stuff.
Right.
Where the Switch doesn't have it on there because it's too big a game for that. But it's the same.
I mean, they did just do that whole like Borderlands like push where they released all of those games over the last year on it. So I'd be surprised if by Christmas of this year, if there was not at least an announcement of a Wonderlands version coming. It'll be the Switch version, right? Yeah. And half of it'll, or more than
it'll
half
be a cloud game. It'll be like Control was, or which is a whole other thing that I'm not real into getting into, the Switch cloud gaming of it all. But yeah, it's more the fact that yes, they could push out all those other Borderland games, which were honestly 7th gen, like PS3 games.
Right, exactly.
Like, so it makes sense that the Switch could run them, but Tiny Tina was built with the Series X and the PS5 in mind.
Yes.
Like sure. So you consider that thing. So if you have $300 and you want to play the bigger stuff, I mean that Series S, I'm at 1440p, 120 hertz out of that S, which is impressive visuals. Yeah, when you consider other stuff.
That's the other thing about it is that because it is a Borderlands game, it is visually, the cel shaded world that is in Borderlands, and to that point, I don't want to say that they've hit kind of their limit on what that can look like, but like it doesn't look nearly. It doesn't. The leap between it and 3 is nothing compared to the leap between 3 and the original version of 2. 2 was out for what 5 years before 3 came out. But yeah, so it's only been a couple of years now between these two. So there's also this
about 5 years, Sejohn.
Has it since? 3?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe 4. I think it was 2018 that 3 came out, wasn't it? It was 18 or 19. It's not.
So I think it's only been about 3 years since that one. But because I played that here in Utah, and I have not been in Utah for 5 years.
Well,
so
there you go. Yeah, we've been doing the show for 6, so that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that idea that like that the visual leap is not quite there, and I'm playing on my PS4 Pro, so I'm maybe on the PS5 there is even that much more, but on my PS4 Pro with the HDR stuff on, set to just to be entirely clear, I think right now I'm set to performance based over resolution based, I think are the two options that they give you. I'm not seeing a huge advancement in anything. I'm not seeing nearly as much like clipping or like weird like jitteriness or anything like that as I kind of see sometimes in 3 when I'm playing in that exact same setup. But like it doesn't feel like they've innovated in any way. It just feels like what they've done is just fixed a lot of like some of the visual stuff that I experienced while playing PS3. Borderlands 3
on PS4.
Yeah. So that is also like something that is, And I've only played for a few hours, so maybe. But the character creator does definitely mean that there's a little bit more going on in terms of the engine and stuff. Although you never see your character, that is purely for the aesthetic of your friends coming into your game and seeing your shit.
Right,
I
but
don't
that
know.
means that it's still being rendered for your
Yeah,
friends, so
yeah,
they
yeah,
can't.
that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a wild kind of experiment for them, and I really wanted to support it because I love the series as much as I do. And right now, with the few hours that I've put into it, I'm very happy I supported it because I think it's actually really cool. Because the other thing is in the long run, what does this mean for the Borderlands series? It means that they don't have to keep tying themselves to the some of the stuff
to
because one of the
Pandora and everything.
well, and the
Yeah.
and the ways in which people were curious to see how they handled things going from 2 to 3, it was really cool. The idea, like, oh no, you're going to go to other planets and stuff. Definitely, one of the best parts of 3 is the idea that you go to different planets and stuff.
Yeah.
But what that led to was then a lot of loss in narrative, like the ways in which I kind of cared about the fate of Pandora is suddenly gone when I've got 7 other planets to be focused on, right? And the ways in which that game were promised you, look, you're going to get to leave Pandora, but then of course everything comes back to Pandora at the end of that game. Like there's a wild amount of narrative stuff that they kind of have to bend in order to make 3 to work, and it just became like, I don't know, maybe this wasn't the right move. Obviously it was the only move they could make though. So like what else could they do in this world? Well, let's just create an entire other universe that this style of game can take place in, and like this basically opens the doors for them to do all sorts of crazy stuff going forwards.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And it also weirdly will allow them to compete with Destiny in a way that, because there is that fantasy element to the science fiction of Destiny. So
Yeah.
when you start talking about all the fantasy elements that are introduced by it being a Dungeons and Dragons-esque game, I'm excited to see how that fantasy will tie into what is already a deep and enriching world in Borderlands. The other thing that I like is I know this is a game that you're probably going to play like 4 or 5 times. And I think being there when it's like your third playthrough, but it's my first, we will not clash the way that we did on Borderlands 3. If that makes sense to you. Because I know that we both approach games differently from one another, and it was very highlighted by Borderlands 3.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
basic stuff like you wanting to like run to the boss stuff and me wanting to take the time to like explore and look for things because I mean, let's be honest, exploration is rewarded extremely heavily in those
Yes.
games. So it's not just a matter of like I need to see every nook and cranny just to feed like the lore demon in me. I mean, that's definitely also part of it, but like the other side of it is also I know that if we do this, we will be better equipped to then go for the boss. And yeah, I get what you're saying. There's
Yeah.
definitely that element to it as well. It feels like really, and this is kind of the feeling that I hope I still have when I'm 100 hours into it, is it feels like this is going to be the world of like Elder Scrolls to Bethesda's Fallout. This feels like this is going to be the same thing, like to the world of Borderlands, which is like the science fiction, like future, like wasteland style game, is the Borderlands series. But if they continue with the Wonderlands, and they don't always have to tie Tiny Tina to it, as far as I'm concerned, like it's cool, like it's a very good bridge for this one. But if in future games, if she's not a part of it, then that's that'll still work for me. She is not the draw, is what I'm getting at for this particular game for me. But if they want to use the Wonderlands as a way to keep telling their fantasy stories, but using the same basic mechanics and breakdown of the worlds and dungeons and bosses and all that stuff, like I'm so on board for them to have those two running narratives.
Yeah. And if you introduce characters, any of them can be a dungeon master.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
So I guess just one more question before I move on to the next game is Chris Hardwick in Wonderlands? Have you run into Chris Hardwick
not at
yet?
any point that I've hit into him.
Okay.
I have not run into him in any way. And I will say the sensibilities of this game are far and above any of the sense. Like there was some vast improvements with 3 over 1 and 2 and pre-sequel, and even pre-sequel had some progressive movement in the ways in which characters are referred to, the way characters are drawn, the way that the fact that there were quote unquote female psychos, right? Like was like a huge leap for Borderlands 3, and like the fact that they no longer referred to the little people as things like, to use offensive language, midgets and things like that is all removed in 3. By the time you get to 3, you have a lot more progressive understanding of characters and stuff like that. This takes it even further. I mean, like in the character creation stuff, you get to like pick pronouns just because you choose a certain body type, and they don't refer to it as male or female. They refer to it as this one and that one. But even though you pick a particular body type, it doesn't then block anything out for you in later like detail stuff. So if you want to pick a more masculine looking body, but then you want to go through and give some feminine features to the face and give them a feminine voice or anything like that, like the sliding scale of character creation on this game is one of the most progressive scales that I've seen in a while, as far as this deep of character creation goes.
Well, we are in a post-Cyberpunk 2077 world.
Yeah.
And for all the complaints that you can levy against the game, they nailed the character creator.
Yeah. So it's very much also in that vein, which is also really cool. I have not run into somebody like that. I guess to my point, to your question about that, my point being, I think that they've put enough thought into this game that if he shows up, I would be disappointed.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So we'll be on Chris Hardwick watch going forward, just a little bit. But we'll see where things land on that one.
Claptrap has only shown up as a joke in the background.
Well, that's good, considering everything that happened with Claptrap before Borderlands 3. So that's good. I'm excited to hear more about Wonderlands as you go through it and eventually play it with you. Mm-hmm. But I just know I can't jump in for $60 when I know how they run with that game. Yeah. But as soon as it can, I'll put other stuff on hold for it. I almost put other stuff on hold for it again now, but my Better Angels had the wheel on this game.
No, I mean, I am really happy that you decided to go the Kirby route rather than the Borderlands route, because I want to play Kirby, but Kirby is going to be a family game for us, and so I need to wait for everybody to be ready for it, and so I need to get my Kirbo fix through you.
Excellent. I love it. I need to ask you to do something for me while I start this. Can you go to the Target website and look up Kirby and the Forgotten Land and tell me if it's still available?
Yeah, of course I can.
I'd like to share not just the story of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, but the reason why I'm holding it in my hand right now. And that is the fact that, as I mentioned last week, I am eking out into the world again. I am going back out into the world. And one of the main things that kind of got stopped or modified during the whole pandemic was how I received media. And specifically, Switch games, I'm always going to buy physically. It's just because of the way that the digital storefront works on Nintendo Switch, and the fact that sometimes if this isn't your primary system, it won't let you play a game that you've actually paid for. That really bums me out. Especially...
we deal with that a lot because we have one Switch that is shared between the three of us, and one of us is the primary on it. And then there's also a Switch Lite in the house that belongs to somebody else. And when we want to play on one and not the other, the idea that we have to sign out of stuff, it is a terrible system. I thought you were just going to talk about the UI of just the shop in general, which is also terrible. So it's just Nintendo just not getting the online storefront stuff right all around.
Oh, you mean the UI of the Nintendo eShop, where I will type in the exact title of a game and it will not show up, but if I type in something semi-related to the game, it will?
Yeah. No, it's horrible. Also the fact that it won't load the store all at once, and it only loads 3 games at a time, so you gotta wait every time you scroll down for it to load up the next batch. Is just, if you don't have the best of the best internet, Nintendo's online internet structure sucks as a you're complaining about something else. Let's complain about that.
Well, yeah, so what I'm complaining about is so physical is what I go with when I go with the Switch. I have moved to a lot of digital stuff, which is, again, why getting an all-digital system like the Series S was something I was interested in exploring. Yeah. But Switch, I'm still going physical. And a lot of the times, what I would do is I would pre-order these Switch games because I wanted to make sure I had them. It was like Pokemon was a game that I knew I wanted to play on release day. Metroid Dread was a game I knew I wanted to play on release day. And a lot of these stores, and primarily the one I'm talking about initially is going to be Best Buy, you could pre-order it for curbside pickup, which was a godsend for me, right? To not have to go into stores at the height of the pandemic when these games were coming out. It was great. But then, invariably, release day would come. I would first have to wait till 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. because that's when Best Buy opens. So it's not like going to Walmart right when they opened at 7 and getting the game like I used to do in high school. I would go into high school and I would stop and get a game before going to school that day. Yeah. And then sometimes I would play the game at school. Wind Waker, I think it's like the 25th anniversary of Wind Waker or something crazy like that. And that's a game that I went to Walmart, I picked up the game, and then I found a quiet place in the library and played Wind Waker for a while before they found out I was cutting class right at the high school. Good times. Good times.
If it really is the 25th anniversary of Wind Waker, I am sorely disappointed that Nintendo has not done something about that. But sorry,
maybe
go
it's
ahead.
just 20 years. I mean, it was 2003, so it's 20 years. It's probably 20 years since that game came out. Something like that. I just know that the release day of Kirby was like 20 years since Wind Waker, or close to it. There was the same release day for both games, March 25th. Yeah, so Best Buy, I would have to wait till that for the curbside. And then a lot of the times I'd go to the store, I'd check in for curbside, and then I'd get this big screen that said, "We're sorry, this product is not available for curbside pickup." Despite the fact that 3 months ago, when I ordered it for curbside, and when things were better, right? Like, I pre-ordered Metroid Dread in June when numbers were down. Now that numbers are back up in October, being told, like, no, you have to come into the store for this. I don't know why you'd think you could get this curbside. Didn't really make sense to me.
I mean, what that says to me is that they probably saw a lot of issues with employees doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
Like the idea of an employee having to leave the store with a game because they're bringing it outside for curbside pickup for somebody. Like that says to me that they experience some what's the word there? Some loss, shrinkage. But
it shrinks. Yeah. No, it's
which sucks because it probably means that 1 or 2 people ruined it for the rest of us, which is always the way of those types of rules.
Yeah, because I got bigger. I've gotten bigger stuff. I got my Series S at Best Buy, and they had no problem taking that out to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I've switched to, and it started with Metroid Dread, is on release day, I go to the Target website and I pre-order the game for curbside pickup, and I go when Target opens, and they'll send me an email saying it's available, and someone will bring the game out to me. So that's how things have been working with Target. And Target, for a lot of the time, that's where I was getting games pre-pandemic. Because if you have a Target card, and you can get a Target debit card, so it's not really a credit card, it's not affecting your credit score, it just comes out of a bank account that you assign to it, you save 5% on everything, including day one release video games. So if you're somebody like me who's buying a lot of games on release day, those savings add up, and it means something. So Friday comes along, and I'm like, I'm going to get Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. I'm excited to play Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. It looks gorgeous in the trailers. It's been a while since I've gotten to play a Kirby game like this. And, you know, Kirby, he's got a special place in the heart, right? And even though I'm still in the middle of Elden Ring, something light to play, like, to cool off after doing Elden Ring, I'm excited for that.
I think I need Kirby and the Forgotten Lands because it's the kind of Kirby game I wish I already had. Like, I think the worst thing about Kirby as a character for me, as a Nintendo fan, and as somebody that loves the character of Kirby, I always want to go back to Kirby games so that I can quote unquote play a Kirby game. And like 10 minutes into all of them, I remember how silly and kind of unchallenging and structurally they're just not what I love in games and things like that. The only one that I think that I've ever really gotten like deep into, like lost like sleep over, has to be Epic Yarn, right? Like that is probably the only one that I've ever, and that's because there was just so much going on game wise. So that's why I'm so excited about Forgotten Land, is because it feels like it is like a real hefty game, which I don't know if Kirby's ever really had.
Well, Kirby Superstar is probably the heftiest Kirby game, but that's also because it's 8 games in one, quote unquote.
Right.
And I mean, that game, the way that game builds off of like, we have these sprites and we're going to reuse these sprites. That's a great game.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Forgotten Lands. So Friday morning I wake up and I go to pre-order Kirby. First of all, I wait till midnight. I don't go to bed till like after midnight most times. A little bit of the Devon After Dark so that you can understand it a little better. So usually at midnight, these games become available. Sometimes with Target, it's not right at midnight, so I have to wait till the next morning. Or like I'll get up at 2 because it goes live once stuff's available in Mountain Time. Not specifically, usually it's specific time for stuff, but Mountain Time a lot for Target. I don't know. I don't know much about their company. So I go to the website to pre-order it, and it says that it is not available for shipping and it's not available in stores still. And this is at 7 a.m., right? Are they available now? You're on the website. I asked you to do that.
Yeah. So I could go and pick it up or I can get it delivered to me by 11 a.m. if I wanted to, apparently.
That's crazy. When I checked this morning, it still was not available at all in Rhode Island. I could not get Kirby. It was not available at any stores, and I could not even have it shipped to me. Which maybe Mountain Time, maybe that's where Target's located. Who knows? But it's strange to me that like 2 days later, I go into their app and it says, no, this game is not available. So Friday morning at 7, not available. And I'm like, well, okay. They don't open until 8. All the stores around here. I'll wait until 8 o'clock and I'll check again to see if this game is available. Maybe their inventory hasn't updated yet, right? Maybe people haven't put it out on the shelves because staff weren't there. And what's really even stranger is that Target has a tie-in with Kirby so that the little bollards outside are all dressed like Kirby.
Yeah, the first 3 things when you look up Kirby Target, like I expected it to just pop the page to say like, hey, or buy it. No, the first 3 are articles about those Kirby balls.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a Kirby ball.
Everybody wants a Kirby ball. And people are stealing them, and it's crazy what's going on with it. So the fact that it's not available, I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. So on my break, I go over to the Target, because it's not far from where I work, and I take my break a little earlier in the day, and I walk over to the electronics department. Again, I wouldn't be going into stores at like the height of the pandemic, but now where we are with it, I still have my mask on, and I'm like, I'm going to go to the electronics department. I'm going to see what's up. And I go to it, and it's not on the shelf, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm out of luck with Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And as I'm walking away, an electronics employee comes up to me and goes, were you the guy looking for Kirby? I have spoken to nobody. My only looking for Kirby has been on the website up to this point. And you got looking for Kirby? And I'm like, I mean, I am, but I haven't told anybody that. And he's like, you didn't tell him up front that you were looking for Kirby and the Forgotten Lands? I'm like, no. He's like, oh. And he has it in his hand, and I'm like, but I am looking for it. This is the reason why I'm here, is to buy that game. And he goes, yeah, I'll sell it to you. All right. I mean, I got a copy of it right here. So I don't know. Wild. I'm sorry about that other guy if there was someone else looking for the game who didn't get to get it because I bought what might have been the only copy in all of the Rhode Island Targets based upon their website.
Yeah, I feel like we've run into this before with Target in your area, like, and on your side of the country specifically, of like not putting stuff on the shelf that they have. Like
there was Mega Man 11 Day, October 2nd, 2017.
Where like
Dale
the
and I had to go to.
They have 6 copies. Yeah. And for some reason, you walk in and they're like, "No, we don't got it." Yeah.
We had to go to 3 Targets in order to walk away with copies of Mega Man 11 on that day. Wow. So it's happened before, but I got it. I ended up walking out of Target with a physical copy of Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, which I'm gonna recheck, and I'll let Sejohn know what my sites say. But it is good to know that I guess other places can get it at Target. But yeah, so I got it, and I loaded it up. And I do want to lead with the first thing about Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, because I'm a little bit disappointed. And it's a small disappointment, but that is the fact that Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, in all of the trailers, looks like a sprawling open world experience. Is not.
It for me, it was more like a Mario Odyssey style, like you're going to be dropped into this area that is open, but it's very limited in its openness. And you can like move between sections, kind of that sort of attitude. Is that not what it is?
Yeah, so that is what I thought as well, based on the trailers and based on everything. No. And the opening of it, you're kind of dropped into a city and you explore the city a little bit, and there's still some linearity to it, but it feels like a bigger area that you're going to get to explore. It also has like that tinge of tutorial to it all, where like we're teaching you the new stuff about it. Mm-hmm. But then as soon as you clear that area, it becomes a world map, and you go into the levels, and the levels are very linear. There's places to explore to try to find things, and there are goals to each level, and those goals are hidden except for find the Waddle Dees and complete the level. There are 3 hidden goals for every level, 4 for the bosses, which is very fun. Like, I enjoy that. So, like, exploration is rewarded in a lot of ways, but it is not the open world experience that I was expecting it to be. Yeah, and I just want to get that out of the way. If you're somebody on the fence about it.
Yeah, it's like something I was talking about earlier, is that it seems to be par for the course with my feeling with Kirby games, is I always remember fondly playing them, and I always want to get back into them. But then I go back and I play them, and I remember that there's just not much to them. And I think I don't want to talk about them as if they're like little kid games, right? Like it's not like we're talking about like the old like Sega Barney games, like hide and seek games or anything like that. Like there's definitely more going on. They are video games. I'm not saying that they're not real games or anything like that. It's just there's always this feeling with Kirby games that they are geared towards newer players, shall we say, and in that they don't want to get too deep or put too much in a player's way. Like and those kinds of games need to exist. Like I love that. It's just that for a character that is so beloved, and let's face it, Nintendo is propped up as like a centerpiece of their whole thing. I mean, like the last Smash game, like he was the hero of that Smash game.
Well,
right?
that started in Brawl, actually. I was having a discussion about that with like the Brawl, whatever that mode was called, their adventure mode in that game. Kirby was the one you started there. So the Smash Brother games are like slant Kirby games. And it makes sense when you consider the fact that a big part of the Kirby mythos is him traveling to other worlds and dimensions.
Yeah. Well, and in the Smash games in particular, the great thing about starting with him is that his whole copy ability, you put him up against people, and you kind of in a weird way can introduce other characters through him in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like the Ditto, right, of the Nintendo.
He's essentially an evolved Ditto. If you're curious, Pokemon players, what the evolution of Ditto is, it's a Kirby.
Yeah. But that idea that he is so beloved and he is so important to Nintendo lore and all of this stuff that like they literally talked about how they held off on ever doing this intense 3D Kirby for so long because they wanted to get the roundness of Kirby right. Like that's how much they love Kirby. And so like knowing all of that, picking up a game and wanting to get into it and then finding that there's not much meat on those bones is always kind of a letdown for me. So it feels like a little bit of that is continuing here, but I have not played it yet, and I'm still holding out hope that there's more there than not.
So what I really dig about it is those secret achievements for each level, because the way that the game grows, right? If you were just like a kid playing this game, first of all, there are two modes from the beginning, right? We talk about accessibility in games, and I like that. There's Spring Breeze mode, and then there's Wild mode. And Spring Breeze, you have more health, and the timed sections, you have more time to do them. Okay. Where Wild mode, it's like your health is lessened, the time is what they originally intended, and there are more rewards to playing it. Actually really interesting against something like Wonderlands, where playing on the harder difficulty means greater rewards. Yeah. Monetarily, I have like 8,000 coins, and I've only beaten the first 3 worlds of the game, or areas. I'm going to call them areas. They're not really worlds, because they're all in the Forgotten Land. And that doesn't feel like what I might have if I were in Spring Breeze mode, based on how they've spoken about what rewards are. I mean, every time you beat a level in Wild mode, you're given 50 extra coins.
That's cool.
So that's awesome. Yeah. So it's an interesting way to do it. But if you're a kid who plays this game like for the first time, and all you're really focused on is clearing the level, it's when you clear the level that the mystery of what the first hidden achievement is unlocks it. So it shows you what that is. And it's not just the first one. Like if you were to get that, whatever the third achievement point was, it'll unlock the next one that you haven't unlocked yet.
Very cool. Very much a Mario 64 style, like go back in and get the next like moon, get the next star, right? Yeah.
Which is cool. So it adds to that replayability, and it sort of allows the game to grow with you as you play it. Cool. So like it starts as that smaller experience that you talk about with Kirby, but then as you play, each level becomes weirdly more robust as you try to accomplish these different goals within them.
Yeah, now you see, I love that. I really do like that. I mean, again, like not to keep comparing it to Mario Odyssey, but in that same vein of like, you know, when you go through the desert level the first time and then you raise up the pyramid and that's the goal, and then you go back in and now that the pyramid's raised, it allows you to get to different areas and things like that. Like the level growing with you was one of the best parts about Odyssey, and the ways in which the level changed as you kind of did more stuff in it was one of the parts that really added a lot of heft and replayability to that too, right? To its detriment at some point, because when you end up getting 1,000 stars in one level, there's a little bit of a problem there. But yeah, that's cool. It's a great kind of Nintendo way of beefing up their games, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, so I do enjoy it. Even though it's not this open world experience I was expecting, I have enjoyed my time with Kirby. And what I've really enjoyed is as I go through trying to complete every level to 100% before moving forward. There's one that I haven't done because I have no idea how to complete the goal that they have assigned to me, despite having torn that level apart.
Yeah.
And it also sort of reeks of that Nintendo issue where the front end of the game is a little bit more difficult than the later part of the game, because every stage since that level, and it's like the 4th level of the game where I still have something uncompleted, has not felt as difficult to do that.
Wild.
So it's an interesting thing of like hearkening back to the type of games that Kirby used to be and respecting the history of them. It's a good time. I'm really enjoying it. Here's the thing I need to recommend to people, though. If you go into the control scheme, you can set it so that you can suck in enemies with the Y button and jump with the B button, as opposed to jumping with B and sucking in with B and jumping with A. That is how things should be arranged on controllers. I don't want to, like, I mean, again, that's my opinion on it, but it just feels better from like ergonomic standpoint.
Yeah, no,
to have
I
it
mean,
like that.
That I think comes down to a cultural thing. I think because I find that a lot with PlayStation games where changing things around a little bit and suddenly they feel like they make more sense. And I legitimately think it comes down to, as an American, I am used to playing things this way, whereas in Japan they have a feeling about things that way. Like I have like, and so depending on if it is a Western made game, I don't necessarily have to go and do that. But if it is a game that is a Japanese-made game, sometimes I need to go in and adjust some of that stuff. And I'm finding that more and more now on Nintendo as well, because as they do that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, as it's an international release, as opposed to the localization that we saw for every system pre the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is their first truly regional DRM-free system.
Yeah.
I mean, like their handhelds were, but I'm talking like consoles and such. It makes sense that they're making one version of the game and then giving language options. Yeah. So it is the thing of that. But also, like Kirby Superstar, you suck in enemies with Y and you jump with B. So it just makes sense there. You can also change it so that you don't automatically inhale, or I mean, you don't automatically swallow enemies that would give you power-ups. You can choose. I set that to on because it feels more like the original Kirby.
Yeah, where you can then spit them out and use them if you don't want them. Yeah.
Maybe I don't want sword power. Maybe I'm waiting to find a Sir Kibble or a Poppy Brothers Jr., but I still need to hurt people right now.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. But my favorite thing, and this is not anywhere in the game, but I just want to make sure that people are aware of it, if you haven't figured it out, to drop your powers, it's either Y or A that you hold until, like, a bar fills up and then it expels so that you don't accidentally do it. But they have kept, and actually I've given myself, speaking about it, I want to see if I can play this with a regular NES controller. I don't know if I can because it doesn't have the analog stick, but if I can move around with the D-pad, I'm going to try it with a regular controller, because the select button automatically expels your powers, which has been Kirby 101 since the copy ability was introduced with Kirby's Adventure on the NES. And it makes awesome. The game feel so much better as opposed to having to wait like 5 seconds to get rid of a power.
Nice.
Because there are moments where like you're in like a hurry and it's like, well, if I have to hold it to do it, that ruins it. So utilizing select to change power-ups, keep it in mind. If you're
especially on
having
that wild mode, if the timers are different, that is definitely good to know.
Yeah, so it's great. I'm enjoying it. I'm through the first 3 areas, which the boss of the 3rd area, which is like an amusement park, is definitely like the latest furry bait. That's what the internet is calling her, Clawraline. And I gotta tell you, some of the animations in game are a little bit like, really? Is this a Nintendo game? that was very provocative what you just had this character do.
When are you gonna start speedrunning Kirbo?
I don't know if I could ever speedrun this game. I've done the speedrun of Kirby's Dream Land, and honestly, if speedrunning is something you're interested in, that's the game to learn on. It's a 10-minute speedrun once you have it optimized, so like you can see if it's something that you have the patience for. Yeah. Really, is that original Kirby on Game Boy. And it's a lot of fun too. If you're looking for a game to just beat, if you're one of those people who like is trying to beat a game to break a slump, Kirby's Dream Land I recommend. But Forgotten Land is very enjoyable, and the whole mouthful thing, which is the new technique, and that's sort of what Nintendo always does, is they present you with the same game you've always loved, and then
in this game
they
you're
add
the hat.
a new gimmick. And the mouthful mode, I mean, this could also be called Kirby and the Land of Kinks in a lot of ways, because there's some inflation stuff, like he drinks water and you get some inflation porn right there.
Nice. I'm really into soda machines though, man.
Oh yeah,
is there something in this game for me?
Oh yeah, there is. He eats soda machines and then spits the cans out. So if you're a can man or you're a real soda machine guy, if you're a soda jerk, like, it's all there for you.
Man,
my favorite thing in this game so far, and it's early days, so there could be other stuff. In like the first level of the second area, you eat an O from a hotel sign, so he's just like wide mouth Kirby.
Nice.
Walking around. First of all, looking into it, I've never seen inside of Kirby before, and I never want to ever again. Right? It's just, it is a freaky little moment looking into the open maw of Kirby. But then what he uses it for is you jump in a sailboat that doesn't have a sail, and he uses himself as the sail.
Oh,
so
like a Korok leaf.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So his mouth is there. So he can blow out air to move in certain directions, but also he angles himself to feel the wind in order to steer within the boat. Nice. And like wicked cool sort of stuff there. So it's visually very exciting. I mean, the game is beautiful and it's been a lot of fun, and I will definitely finish this one. I mean, I'm sure I'll finish Elden Ring, but right now I have other games that are more interesting to me because of what they're doing. Where Elden Ring, still a great game, but it did not capture my imagination the way that I thought it would. And that's just a fact.
All right, man.
Also, since we're talking about video games, and we're probably wrapping this episode up here right now, if you do have Xbox Game Pass, you have till the end of the month to play a little game called Narita Boy. That game's awesome. I just want to play Narita Boy. If you have Game Pass, you're looking for something to do, it's an enjoyable little experience that had a much deeper and touching storyline than I was expecting from it. And that's a Team 17 game, so I gave them a lot of shit for, like, Blasphemous. Narita Boy didn't have any of those issues. And again, I think my Blasphemous problems were mostly based on playing it on Amazon Luna.
Team 17 is up there with Devolver for me, though. Like, they get in on a lot of indie projects to help, like, indie games kind of get out there and onto stores and stuff, and I'm in full support of that.
Oh, yeah,
so,
I
will always give Team 17 a try, even if they do have a one that kind of drops sometimes for me. They have gotten so many good, like fun party game hits out of me and things like that. I'm so on board for them.
Yeah, and so Narita Boy is just excellent. If you have Game Pass, give it a shot before it goes away from Game Pass this coming Thursday. And speaking of this coming Thursday, we have a very special episode dropping, and I mentioned that March is Zack Snyder month, and it's the movies that made us, and there's no better combination of those two things than 300. So an episode where Sejohn and I explore 300. And our first impressions and how it means to the world now, that's coming this Thursday. So look for that. Those go exclusively to the podcast platforms. We don't drop those on YouTube. But take a look for that one, because I think it's a really interesting episode, and it explains a lot about why Sejohn and I are who we are today.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that's everything. Oh, also, Mario Kart 8 DLC. I played it. Sejohn played it. 2 thumbs up for these first couple of courses. Real enjoyable stuff.
The 2 Grand Prix that they've put out have been good. Did we talk on the show about it, or was it just off mic?
We talked briefly about the fact that we would talk about it this week, which is why I wanted to make sure we got it in there at the tail end of the episode.
Yeah, no, I'm just really, really enjoying it. I'm hoping that they go a little bit further than just courses. If it's only courses, it is what it is. I mean, it's $25, so like, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm not getting my money's worth. Like, I feel really good about what they're doing. I'm just kind of hoping that Nintendo's gonna use this as an opportunity to really celebrate Mario Kart and and from what they've put out already, it's already looking good. So I'm excited.
Yeah, in terms of that, we had sort of discussed characters being a want. They have done some character updates. I had forgotten that they had added Breath of the Wild link to the game
exactly
later on down the line.
Yeah, and the motorbike and all that stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Like that was all later edition stuff. Yep.
So
yeah, no, they definitely have done that in the past. So the hope that they might do a couple of those types of things going forward, I'm holding out hope.
I guess my hope for that is I want them to do that type of stuff when new Grand Prix drop, but as the free sort of downloads. Yeah. And it's this thing to like sort of pull people to the game. This fact that like now you can race as Kirby from the Forgotten Lands, right? And he's actually on top of the cart like he is in the car there.
That would
right?
be really funny.
That'd be like a really interesting thing for them to do. It'd tie in. It'd be gross marketing stuff, but at the same time, it'd be the kind of stuff I'd love to see in game, just being honest about it. And if they do that and then you're playing Mario Kart 8 again and they're like, oh, by the way, we got these new tracks that you can get, I'd be all right if we got a little something for free in order to support this paid element of the game.
Yep.
And that's how they've done it a lot with additional characters in these games. So we'll see what happens. But what I will say is, with just these 8 courses, I already kind of feel like I got my $25 worth. And there are 5 more DLC track drops to come.
Yeah, exactly. So like with the idea that it is this price for this and this is what we're getting, I already am on board. It's just that this is what they're choosing to do instead of focusing on a Mario Kart 9 at this moment. And so with that, like I hope that they don't do themselves a disservice and kind of ignore some of the other features that people love about these games. Because like tracks is definitely a huge part of it. But the other reason that people love these games is, you know, the vehicles, the characters, and all that stuff too. Like, so just don't forget that in the long run.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. You know what? I want to see Rob come back. I loved racing as Rob in Mario Kart DS.
Well, and we talked about like how the Mario Kart phone game had Grand Tour or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Grand Tour
has been really blowing it up with people and like adding like Diddy Kong and stuff like that, right? Like so they've been doing that kind of stuff there, and they know how important it is there. So that's why I think it just adds fuel to the fire for me. I just hope that they do some of that cool stuff with the main game too.
If I could race as Funky Kong again in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I would. That's really my dream.
Put me on a surfboard and let me drown everybody else and then go by.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But yeah, so there we are, and I am going to just put it on record on this show so I can point to it and say, see, this is what they're doing. I think that DLC drops internally, they're going to try to hit every 4 months. So my guess is that we're going to see the next 2 Grand Prix in July, and then the last 2 Grand Prix will probably be the last week of November to try to capture that.
Just in time for Christmas and all that, yeah.
And then 4 weeks from November will bring us back to a March release to keep that going again. And every 4 months, I mean, that kind of ties into financial quarters a little bit, and to make sure that they can kind of see the end of a quarter and the start of a quarter, and if it's affected anything in those sales. And
it gets them through not just to 2023, but through 2023 without anybody out there like asking about where Mario Kart 9 is, right?
Right. So it covers 2 years worth of content for them, and that's 2 years worth of development as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So who knows what's coming there, but my guess is it's going to be every 4 months we should see more Mario Kart, and I look forward to either being proven correct or being proven wrong. Let's see what happens, Nintendo. Let's play. We would like to play. All right, Siege. Anything else you want to add before we send this one off?
We can talk about this more next week, but I'm pretty sure that I've been put on a list by the Mormon Church now because I've been searching and out there buying a particular book. But we'll talk more about that next week because I think the television adaptation of said book is coming out, if not out already, and so I want to kind of explore both before we dive into it.
Excellent. And I will, since Sejohn added the trailer, I think I'm finally going to delve into the Yellow House game. I don't think I've ever talked about it on this show, but I've been referencing it a little bit more lately. And
okay.
I'd like to share Yellow House with you. So
all right, man.
Something to look forward to. Until that time, if you are playing Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and you want to share your character creations with somebody, At Siege versus the World with Twitter would love to see them.
Oh, I love it. Character creation, and especially goofy character creation, is some of the best like video game time I ever have. So yes, please send them my way. And if you've got any other unfortunate fan art from Kirby that you want Devon to take a look at, whether it's wide mouth mode or kitty cats or whatever you want to send his way, you can find him at Devon D. Decker.
Let's just be honest. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Kirby starts off as a vor fantasy kink game, right? Even back in '89.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not new, people. It's not new. All right. Until next time, Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.